we'll go to the next slide. I'll show you what an unhealthy brain looks like. So you'll see, I'll point to just the one with marijuana. So the brain scan up in the upper right-hand corner is of a 16-year-old who began using marijuana when he or she was 14 years old. So that's what happens to your brain after 2 years of using marijuana on a frequent basis. And again, going back to why we care so much about those students who are using weekly, this is what could happen to their brain. You see that there are a lot of holes in the brain. It's decreased blood flow. And you can imagine how that can impact concentration, being able to think, being able to problem solve, which then translates to problems in school and in the classroom and how they're able to function. And then this is one, it's just very brief. We mentioned this at the beginning, but most substance use occurs at home or at a friend's house. So a lot of people, can tend to blame the school system and saying, well, that's where the substance use is happening. But overwhelmingly, across pretty much every border, with the exception of e-cigarettes, substance use is occurring at home. Very little is occurring within the school system. So schools are very safe for our students, actually. It's a good thing. And most substance use occurs on the weekends or after school. So let's dive into mental health findings. Talk a little bit about that. So just generally, nationally, what we know, and Sally mentioned this, about 25% of young people will experience some sort of mental health challenge in their lifetime. Half of those challenges will begin by age 14, 75% will be there by the time someone turns 24. And anxiety and depression are two of the most commonly seen disorders among people, which is generally in the nation. You hear a lot about those in the media as well. And nationally, about 32% of young people have a diagnosable anxiety disorder. So very common. So let's take it back down to the local level here at Rappahannock and what we found when we surveyed students. So we found that 45% of our young people are reporting that they're struggling with anxiety. So we didn't necessarily just ask them, okay, let's check off the list of what you're struggling with. We actually gave them more of a definition of anxiety. And we asked, in the past 12 months, have you found yourself so worried or anxious that it's impacted your ability to do schoolwork, it's impacted your ability to engage with other people, and just carry out normal daily activities? So that's what 45% of our students are responding to, saying that yes, I've struggled with that in the past 12 months. Same thing with depression, we'll go into that in the next slide. 35% of young people are reporting experiencing depression in the last 12 months and 8% for an eating disorder. So this is the actual question in this complex survey. During the past year, did you ever feel sad or hopeless almost every day for 2 weeks or more? So in the clinical world, this is diagnosable as major depressive disorder. So this is that definition. 34% of our middle schoolers, which translated to 34 students, responded yes to that question, and 44 students in our high school, so which is 35% of our high school respondents, said yes to that question. So these are really important things as we begin to think about justifying our school social work position, why this is so important, because this is what our students are telling us. We asked about suicidal thoughts. So the actual question on the survey was, during the past 12 months, did you ever think to yourself, I wish I were dead? A little over a quarter of the students responded as saying yes, they had had that thought in the last 12 months. And of those students, 16 of them said that they had been thinking of suicide often or a lot. And the reason that we care about that specifically is because those students that are at much higher risk of attempting suicide or carrying out suicide. So we're really paying attention to that because we know that suicide is the second leading cause of death for young people between the ages of 15 and 24. And suicide has been on the rise in our country over the last few years. It is one of the reasons why life expectancy actually decreased in the U.S. So young people are feeling pretty stressed. Let's go to the next slide and I'll show you where they're feeling it. So these are Rappahannock numbers. Schoolwork is overwhelmingly one of the areas where young people feel stressed. Now, most of us as adults would say that we probably feel a lot of stress in our jobs, and that's how we're one of the biggest stressors in our lives. And so it's not uncommon to see that, but I think as we move forward and thinking about 72% of our high school students are feeling the most stress in schoolwork, and 52% of middle schoolers are feeling the most stress in schoolwork, we're working with Dr. Grizzly in the school system to say, okay, what can we do if they are feeling stressed to help them cope with it, to help them deal with that stress so that they can be effective in other areas of their life and in schools and what they're doing. And we're trying to figure out why 13% said they have no stress. Like, we're trying to find those 13% of high schoolers, because I want to learn from them why they have no stress. And 23% of middle schoolers. So I don't know, maybe we're doing it wrong. We don't learn from those, but paying attention to some of those things. And so we also ask them how they handle their 61% said they would talk to someone. This was actually higher than the regional average. So kids in Rappahannock are more likely to talk to someone, which is really encouraging. 52% said they would sleep, 42% would do exercise or journaling or some sort of other hobby that they have. So those are kind of more positive things that you do to cope with your stress when you have it. We're focusing on kind of the bottom part and wondering, okay, if 20% are gambling or eating, or 13% are drinking something, or 5% are drinking alcohol, how can we shift their thinking to looking at more positive ways to cope with stress? Because that will benefit them not only just in school as adolescents, but also well into adulthood and learning how to cope with it when you feel stressed. So we're doing a lot of initiatives to help with that too, thinking of different things. Who do you go to when you need to talk? 59% would go to a friend, which could be a really good thing if their friend knows how to get them to the right resources. And so one of the big initiatives that we have at the Mental Health Association and also the schools in general is wanting to really educate peers on how to know where do you go in the school system if your friend is struggling. If your friend tells you they're thinking of suicide, who do you go to? How do you get them the help that they need? So again, kind of increasing that awareness among students about what's available to them in school, but also in the community. 55% would go to a parent, 27% would go to a counselor, and I'll highlight that 19% that said they wouldn't go to anyone. And so, we'll learn about that in the next slide, actually, if we want to go ahead to that one. There's still a stigma associated with having mental health issues if you're struggling with anxiety or depression. 23% said that they wouldn't seek help because they'd be worried about what other people would think. So we still have a lot of work to do just in terms of helping students understand that, a lot of their peers are struggling too, that what they feel isn't that uncommon, that help is available to them. And there are a lot of areas where we can also help them, if they don't know where to go, or they don't know how they're going to pay for services or get transportation. Those are things we can work on as a school and as a community to increase their awareness of. Everyone always asks the million-dollar question about cell phones and mental health, so I thought I'd throw it in here. For the first time, Pride asked the question, in the past year, have you tried to cut down on the time you run your cell phone? 47% of our students said yes, and they asked, do you think that any of your friends use their cell phones too much? And 60% of the students said yes. So I think that if you're trying to cut back, we can say that it might be having some impact, that students are seeing some impact on their cell phone use on their life. And we'll go to the next one. So this is a study that was put out by the Child Mind Institute, and I just think this is mind-blowing. 8 to 12-year-olds average about 6 hours on their cell phone, and 13 to 18-year-olds average about 9 hours on their cell phone per day. I know, right? So it's a lot of time that they're spending. So if you're doing something that often every day, it's hard to argue that it doesn't have some sort of impact. We're still doing a lot of research into how much that impacts young people. But we do know that it has been shown to affect sleep patterns, to affect a person's mood, their feelings of self-worth when they're going on social media, maybe comparing to other students or other people's lives, and how they just in general communicate with others. And so I'll read this for the people who may not be able to see it. This is an excerpt from that study, and it says it feels like addiction. In a 2016 survey, half of teenagers said they feel addicted to their mobile device, and 72% said they felt the need to immediately respond to texts and social networking messages. So it's this feeling of always needing to be plugged in, which can be correlated with higher levels of anxiety for young people. And so more than 3 hours a day of social media use is linked to depression in adolescents between the ages of 12 and 15. So it's kind of a chicken or the egg situation. You wonder what came first. Was it depression or was it social media? Some young people may be going on social media, comparing, and getting depressed because maybe they don't have the life that other people are living. Whereas maybe, a young person was just struggling with depression in general for various circumstances, and they're going on social media to feel better, to get more connected with people. So there's still a lot of research that needs to be done in this area, but I thought I'd throw that in there so you at least kind of know where that stands at this point in time. And so, Sally, do you want to talk a little bit about what we're doing as a community? Sure. I'll throw it back to Sally because you might be tired of hearing from me. We'll make that. Good job.
So I do want to say that we have a marvelous partner in this community with the Rappahannock County Public Schools. They're doing some really proactive and creative things, and we've really enjoyed working with them and want to continue doing so. Some of the things we want to be looking at, based on the things that Brittany just told you, are reducing the stigma so that people who are suffering feel like they can reach out and express themselves and get help. And we're doing that largely through awareness and education. We also want to help when someone is suffering, make sure there's a responsive system. We are identifying people early and that there's somebody out there to give them care. And I think that's something that our community in general is going to have to be working on in the next few years, because we don't have a lot of resources in the behavioral health area in our community. We also need to give information to parents and support parents. And we want to make sure that school systems and the community have good prevention programs. So some of those things, next slide, that I would just share with you. We do have a group now called the Rappahannock Behavioral Health Roundtable. The schools are involved, DSS, a lot of representation from community, just citizens and other groups, funding sources, and we at the Community Services Board. We've been talking about what we need in this community and how to get it. And I think there's some really exciting things that are going to be coming out of that group. We also have put a lot of emphasis on education. I don't know how many of you have heard of mental health first aid. We have now trained 1,814 people in this community. That's a big commitment of time. That's an 8-hour, 9-hour day. And we're very excited that not only, and also I would point out that a large number, I think the majority of our Rappahannock County teachers have all been through mental health first aid as well as other local citizens. But a really exciting thing that's coming online, we hope by next fall, is they've developed a curriculum specifically to teach 10th through 12th graders about mental health and substance use issues and build their ability to do what Brittany was talking about, supporting each other and helping each other find resources when they're needed. So I'm hoping that there's a pilot project right now at Fauquier High School. We're one of 35 pilots across the country, and I think that will be going online in the fall, and I'm hoping that all of our local school systems can implement that. So we also have I think a lot of good things that have been happening in the past few years. I want to again tout the social worker position, because I think that's made a huge difference, and I hope that is something we can continue and build on. The schools have also done a lot of work on trauma-informed care. The biggest risk factor for a mental health problem is having experienced trauma. So having a school system and a community that's really informed about what that means, know how to respond. It's shifting from talking about what's wrong with that student to what happened to that student. So I applaud schools for doing that. We've been pleased to work as a partner in that as well. We also had a youth dialogue for Youth Voices in November, Rappahannock County 17. A lot of discussion there about how students could support each other, what they were seeing in their own schools. We shared this preliminary PRIDE data with them, and just fascinating listening, really, really smart, perceptive young people with lots of great ideas about how to help each other. One of the things that we had as part of that dialogue was an inspirational speaker named Daryl Bellamy. He's a very young guy who really has a dynamic approach, and students responded to him so well. He has a program called From Fearful to Fearless. And afterwards, some of the participants said they thought it was so powerful. They said it was a life-changing experience. So they also said, couldn't we bring him to speak to our entire student body? So in March, we are bringing Daryl Bellamy to speak to the entire student body here. And I believe Chris Heron is also coming to speak to students. So we've got a lot of high-powered people that really can drive home both what some of the risks are and what some of the opportunities for developing a more healthy and happy way of responding to situations. I think another program I heard about that I thought was wonderful about Rappahannock is the Verdun Adventure Bound partnership to help at-risk students have an experiential learning. Those are the kinds of things that build resilience, that build coping skills, etc. So a lot going on, a lot we still need to do, but I really think we've got the energy and capability in this community to make a difference. And if we do the Pride survey again, hopefully we'll look back and say, wow, we're really trending in the right direction. So thank you so much for your interest. Our last slide is just a list of all the partners. We have probably 25 different organizations that are working together. Mary comes to the Mental Health Collaborative, Rappahannock Schools come. We have a whole 3-year plan for how we can increase access to mental health care in the region. So we'll be glad to report back on how those go. So. I don't know if you have any questions.
I have a question. So I was wondering if how loneliness fits into this matrix, if you all asked any questions about that, because I heard that heavy users of social media are 73% more likely to be lonely. And people that are lonely get depressed, they basically more suicidal thoughts, I would think, and anxiety, and also it seems like it's always a loner that turns violent. So I was wondering, was that any part of the question, or if you do it again, maybe you might think about putting that in?
I don't think they asked a question that was phrased just that way, but you're absolutely right. And I think a lot of the social media research has pointed that. And that's, of course, a factor for mental health for all ages, really. So loneliness, I think, is a really interesting way to focus on who may be at risk. And we do have, they change the Pride questions each year, so we do have an opportunity to send in suggestions.
Okay.
Sally, great presentation, and you beat me to the punch when you mentioned Adventure Bound at the end of your talk. The one thing that came to mind as you're talking about anxiety, stress, and depression is the county we live in, and it's perhaps naive to think that, well, we live in this great outdoor-oriented place, how could young people become stressed or feel anxiety, which then led to my thinking, how much more creative can we all be on these two boards and otherwise to make better use of the Shenandoah National Park as a partner within the schools. And I recognize I'm not a clinician. I don't know whether or not that's a sensible remedy for something helpful for anxiety and stress, but it just occurs to me that we have this national park that's 20% of our land mass and a great neighbor, and I would hope that if there is benefit from improving that relationship, you'll call upon all of us to do our part to try to integrate the national park more into the schools in this regard. Just a thought that came to mind.
There's pretty good data that time spent in green spaces improves mental health, so very much the point. And also, it also connects with what Chris said. They did study or correlate answers about how involved are you in extracurricular activities, et cetera. So connectedness is a really strong protective factor. So looking at how we can build opportunities for young people to experience and explore in healthy ways, whether it's green spaces or other things, seem to me to be right to the heart of what we can do to make a difference.
Yes, and that was a drive for the Courtyard Project too, and Commit to Be Fit, all of those initiatives we have in the school. We do know that exercise and being outdoors and hands-on activities are actually as effective or more effective than Zoloft, was last research I actually read. Does the same to the brain. So, get off the meds, get outside, and we'll take care of it.
Exercise is the key to the whole.
It really is. So that's what we try to infuse. We also are embarking on adopting a social emotional learning curriculum to go K-12 as a parallel curriculum to undergird a comprehensive plan for learning and academic achievement. So our team has been doing so much with that, and we'll have that presentation in April ready for adoption. Lots of things going on in March. We also have a hidden in plain sight demonstration coming for our parents and also our teachers. We have 2 demonstrations, one for our teachers and one for the adults, but basically they set up a mock bedroom of a teenager and bring the parents through and say, see what you can find. And the parents, guess what, it's right in plain sight, and we'll show them what to look for, and we need the parents as partners on this because in our county we are pretty isolated at times and we don't have a lot of opportunities other than school to congregate and be together, and so we want to educate our parents as well.
I think also the general public.
Absolutely.
You know, if there's a way that, Brittany, if you guys could write a short article, and John and everybody put it in their paper every month or every week regarding this kind of thing, where people see it and they read it. And I think the general public does not have a clue about the issues of depression and so forth.
That's a great idea. And also, if anybody and we are willing to come and do this specific presentation for other groups at their venues, which that would be helpful.
Sally, I apologize. I don't have any children, and I'm new to this role, so I'm going to ask you several questions if you don't mind. The 238 students from Rappahannock, that's not all we have from 7 to 12, is it?
Yeah.
So how did they decide the number of students?
What happens is it's given at one specific time. So it's students who were present at that day, and I don't know other issues that might have affected that, but it was a self-select. I mean, they were all given the opportunity, people who were in attendance that day. So
They were, and we wanted a bigger swath than we had previously. In previous Pride surveys, we had a typical count of only about 50 respondents. So we wanted a much broader swath from all of those grade levels and get those numbers up. So that's a great return for the data, much better sample for what we're trying to measure.
I'm going to keep going if you don't mind. The jump from middle school to high school from alcohol and marijuana is huge. Is there any background on why the older you get, the more access?
access, just aware. We had a lot of concerns this time around about, frankly, discussions about legalization and what kind of perceptions young people have. So the older they get, the more they're exposed to those kinds of discussions. One thing I was going to add was, since we know the age of first use is an issue, if you look at 12 and 6 months, 12 years, 6 months for alcohol, not 13.2 or 4 for marijuana. What you need to do if you're going to prevent things is go back about 3 years. So things that we're doing in, you were talking about social emotional learning, that's really important because we need to be, again, not only giving kids coping skills, but really discussing the things they're going to experience when they move up through the grades. And you look at the mental health issues too, you see the trend getting much more anxiety the closer you get to 11th grade is probably the peak, 11th and 12th, for both depression and anxiety.
And I would also add that for a lot of young people who are experiencing anxiety or depression, they may be using alcohol as a way to cope with those feelings because they're more aware that that's available to them. And so that may be one of the reasons that we see that increase as well as they get older.
On the alcohol side of things, I'm a restaurant owner, so does the Virginia ABC do anything with the school systems to try to help educate or?
They have a great program that's kind of, in some ways, ironic that they're the ones sponsoring it. It's the youth alcohol and drug addiction prevention program. It's a week-long program in Farmville at Longwood College, and we have had teams from several of the Fauquier schools have attended, and we'd love to have a team from Rappahannock. It's great leadership training, and they get a lot of information, and they come back and do projects in their own communities. So that's the big one I know about, but I think they also have other programs.
Sorry, I'm taking up so much time, but
Good question.
trying to understand. The youth struggling with mental wellness, I'm wondering how the anxiety, depression, eating disorders compares to like a 10-year ago time frame. Are we seeing a huge jump, or is this slightly incremental?
I would say it's more than incremental, but one of the things that may be happening, we know that young people have more information, so people may be identifying issues and willing to express their concerns, so that may be part of the increase. The one factor that Brittany touched on was the increase in suicidal thinking and suicide attempts. That has been more than incremental. And, you know, I think the biggest increase, I think the suicide rate has increased like 30% in the last decade. And the biggest percentage increase was females aged 8 to 12. Not the highest numbers, but the biggest percentage. So that's one we really are concerned about. And the mental health first aid course is really good on helping people recognize some signs of suicidal thinking, and being able to step up and ask difficult questions about, you know, are you thinking of killing yourself?
I'm not a big fan of social media, and I just wonder the use of the cell phone in the classroom, is that allowed here? What are the rules as far as children with phones?
Well, allowed, no. Well, we have certain teachers that may use them as part of a lesson. That's the only time they're allowed to be out in class. The rest of the time they should be away, other than transition times and lunch. And we've done a lot of work on our network to limit accessibility to things like social media and those trouble sites that our kids ping off of quite a lot. So it's a constant struggle. Part of that, again, bringing parents on board, because for every few that want to take them from their children, I have 10 more who gave them to them in the first place that want to get in touch with their children all the time, every second of the day. So I understand that need for connectivity, but at the same time, you can get in touch with your child. We do have phones, and we can page them, and we have other means other than that. So it is a struggle, and it's something that we are constantly talking about and working with our parents, particularly getting cell phones at a very young age for children. And we're getting ready to release a flyer about, before you buy your child a cell phone, here's a checklist of things you need to be able to check off before you get it. Do you understand parental controls? Do you understand these sites? Here's a list of things, resources for parents that you need to be aware of. Because if you can't check that off, you should not buy your child a cell phone. So we're working, but we need our parents to help us with that. It's not just the schools.
We probably get more questions about that than anything else, because parents don't know what to do. It's not you can't use it. It's not a black and white equation like that. It's how do you manage it, and it's on everybody's. When we talk about anxiety, we ask a room full of adults, do you think anxiety is on the rise? We ask why, and the first answer out of everybody's mouth is social media. So.
Very easy to surround yourself with negativity in the social media world. Thank you.
I was just wondering about two things. The first thing is I really wanted to expand a little bit on the community partnerships that we're developing at school, starting with the Courtyard Project. This year there will be adults with each grade, kindergarten through 7th grade, doing a special hands-on outdoor-oriented lesson with just a handful of volunteers in the community. And I think, as we talk about, I remember what I was like when I was, in middle school, and I didn't always, oh goody, I'm going to go to a leadership training so that I can be goody two-shoes among my peers. I wasn't like that. I really liked to do the things that I was into. And it was just one mini story. Shenandoah Park is a little ways away. We have a little woods right behind the elementary school. Just a group of master naturalists came out for 1 hour and did a simple scavenger hunt with all the first graders. You should have seen, those kids, there was like a light turning on, just seeing a Y-shaped branch on a tree, very simple things. So we have that access, like literally at our fingertips. We don't even need to go on a bus ride to have the benefits. We have a labyrinth now in the courtyard at school, and I know from Ms. Sickler that's been in use. And so things that I think it's turning it's not hard. So it's not hard to get that access. That's one piece. And another question I have is just how the DARE program and maybe an expansion of, this is a totally different thing, but of either younger and older reinforcement of that program. We do DARE in 5th grade. I just wonder about like how that fits in, and if we can sort of infuse a different, sort of more incremental, and not like, okay, you've checked off everything you need to know, because obviously these students, this is telling me, the students haven't really checked off everything they need to know after their 5th grade experience with that program. What do we have to augment that? What do we have to, I know that you are looking at that, but I'd like to just bring that up, that we could do with the kids more to sort of have an addressing of some of this.
And the health curriculum and the family life curriculum is expanded to include those components every year. So every year from 5th grade on, they do get pieces of that are required in additional to topics like sexual harassment and healthy relationships and all these components, and they're continuously changing. There's a new iteration of the proposed family life curriculum that's going to include human trafficking and some of the other topics. We hate that we have to discuss those, but they do have to be infused in the curriculum. Also, part of that is the structure of the scheduling and things that we have to do. So I know the elementary school is incorporating circle time as a time to bring the classroom community together, integrate the social emotional learning curriculum, restorative circles, things like that we can address those issues. But you're right, it can't be just one time in 5th grade. And it hasn't been to that extent, but it needs to be, we need to be more hyper aware, and we need to be working individually with kids too who we know are at risk, which has been an incredible highlight that I want to point out that Ms. Sigler's been doing for us. She's really getting in there with the kids and finding out some situations that you just wouldn't imagine happen here, and can really give them the skills and the coping strategies and the resources that the family needs. So we're thrilled with that. So thank you for your support of that in the budget and letting us do that, because what we're finding is I need like 2 more, unfortunately, but it's a start.
So the DARE program has been a complete failure, as far as I can see. It's just once, is it still going on, the DARE program?
Oh, yeah. And we have DARE Day, and it's an event, and in 5th grade is where their curriculum is to raise the awareness. And I wouldn't say it's a failure, but it can't be a standalone solution.
No, one time in the 5th grade is not going to work. It's got to be every year, like you say, from
Right.
kindergarten right on through.
Yes.
There are a number of prevention programs that give all sort of stepped up information over grade levels, and the teen mental health first aid will address some of that as well.
That makes sense.
And one thing about your courtyard project, I was thinking, one of the biggest protective factors for young people is just having some adult in their life that can talk to. So then again, a number of times that we can help make connections in fun and positive ways, help kids have access to more people that they can bring into their lives.
Any other questions?
I have one more for Sally. You mentioned in your opening the social worker position that was funded last year, and you mentioned a need for other things. And just from an ongoing funding perspective, what are some of those other things that you envision, or are they softer things like just getting families involved or community support? Is there anything that comes to mind? I don't mean to put you on the spot. I heard other, so.
I would say it's soft and whatever the opposite of that is. Soft and expensive. Yeah, I mean, we just don't have many resources when kids need, or families, children and families need clinical help. We just don't, people have to drive out of the county to get those. We do have some good resources if you can drive, but it's definitely something we need to address. And within the school system, I'm guessing that the kinds, from my conversations with Kathy Sickler, that we're seeing the kinds of response to her work that we're probably going to, if we were able to fund it, additional social worker or behavior interventionist or something like that. But I would leave that to Dr. Griggs to comment.
Absolutely. So those components we are taking into consideration. There's a lot of competing priorities in the school budget, of course, with the understanding of our enrollment loss too. And I'll talk a lot more about that in the building blocks presentation during the school board portion about what we're looking at. But it is very high priority for the school division. And what's beautiful though about the partnerships that we've been forming is there's been a lot of opportunities for grants. And the Mental Health Association Block here has helped us so much getting the materials we need for trainings and sending our students to trainings and our teachers and providing materials and resources. So those things have been great too. And there are other grants on the horizon that are going to try to solve some of these problems too. So more on that. Stay tuned.
Be here for a while.
Well, thank you very much for your interest, and if we can be of any help, but like I said, we have reams of data, so if you have other questions, just ask them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So that seems to be very heavy, and it really is. And I know I get chills when I see that data. And you remember just a couple of years ago, I came to you with a very similar feeling about the loss of Head Start programming and what we were going to do for the families that are at risk. So we have, speaking of resilience, kind of a great story and successes to share with you, some challenges and some recommendations. So about our preschool status and what we're looking forward to in the coming years. So I'm going to invite Lisa Payne-Wells, the Executive Director from CCLC, to come to the podium and help share this story.
I'm going to try to lean in closer because I know I have a very soft voice, not helped by the cold that I'm getting over. I'm Lisa Payne-Wells, and thank you so much for letting me come in this evening and talk a little bit about the successes and challenges of our first 3 semesters into the first collaboration. As you guys probably know, we started the preschool collaboration back in September of 2018 with a very generous amount of support from the Board of Supervisors, $150,000 at that point to be able to serve 18 children. And we did serve those 18 children and 8 other children that came in, go through Headwaters and some other kids that were on a waiting list to get into the Head Start program at the point where it was canceled. So before I get into kind of the nitty-gritty of where we got to where we are today, what's going well and what isn't going well, and what we see going forward, I wanted to just kind of remind everybody in the room a little bit that we do know from the available research that there are some really pretty pronounced benefits from preschool participation. I think a lot of us think of preschool as being kind of that interim stage between childcare and when our kids actually start school. And I think most of us know just kind of both emotionally and intellectually that it's really good for kids to go to preschool because they learn things like how to share, how to sit in your seat, how to listen to a teacher, how not to hit your other friends in school when they have something that you would like to take away from them. And so a lot of what we do in preschool is what we refer to in the field as prosocial behavior. And that seems to be kind of the hallmark for most of the studies that have been done about preschool participation. You take children that are coming from a whole wide varieties of life, some of whom have experienced much trauma in their short lives, other kids that are coming from never having been in any kind of setting before where they've had an adult tell them to kind of conform to a certain manner of behavior in order to be able to be educated. And those kids come together and something kind of magical happens with their teacher. The kids have fun, they play, they learn, but they also learn, more importantly, how to be kind of good citizens of the world. I won't go through all of the preschool benefits, you can see them up on the screen, but some that I think we want to point out because they're relevant to the First Step collaboration is that we know that preschool benefits all children. It has those short-term benefits academically for kids. There's been a wonderful longitudinal study that's been ongoing for 40 years now that actually indicates that there are very good long-term prosocial benefits to preschool participation. 40 years out, people tend to have better relationships. They tend to be more stable employees. They tend to have actually healthier lives, healthier relationships, and lower criminality. On the short run, what we know is that the kids that we bring into preschool in a mixed classroom, with some kids that are from better financed socioeconomic backgrounds, some kids that are poor, some kids that are non-English speakers, some kids that are coming into the classroom with developmental disabilities that perhaps haven't been identified yet. Those kids actually have, you know, a kind of, there's something that happens when they come together that begins to kind of influence. That influence that happens actually has better impact on the kids that are coming in who are non-English speakers and kids that are coming from more disadvantaged backgrounds. So while everybody benefits, we see the biggest benefit for kids that actually need it the most, because what we know what happens is for those kids is that they hit kindergarten and have not had the opportunity to actually engage in a structured setting where they learn that prosocial behavior. They tend to act out in a way, both kindergarten and first grade, that then creates some learning barriers. And those kids we can see both from their initial house scores and then what we see at third grade, that they have a lot of difficulty catching up. So the idea behind this is that if we start early with 3s and 4-year-old children, which is the Head Start model, and work with those children to be ready for school by the age of 5, we are really going to be helping that child start with the best ability to be able to learn and to be successful in school. The other thing that I think is probably very important about preschool, and then we'll go ahead and switch to the next slide, is that it also gives us an opportunity to really do early identification of kids with special needs. I think I say in a slide later on in this presentation, but we've identified about 10 kids over the 3 semesters that we've been doing First Step collaboration that have then moved on to the child study process for speech and language difficulties, for other behavioral difficulties, for things that we believe may be some manifestations of kind of pervasive developmental disorders. And those types of services being provided to kids at CCLC or at the school system, but done early, can really help a child, again, be really ready to participate actively once they actually get into elementary school. So just to kind of recap how we got here. Back in July of 2018, the school system here, who was the vendor for Head Start, actually learned fairly suddenly that the federal government had terminated the Head Start grant. And what happened after that is there were 18 kids that had already been accepted for Head Start, and there was really no place for those kids to go. And we then, at the Child Care and Learning Center, were asked whether or not we could enroll those kids, and we did. And then, of course, in September, we were able to get Board of Supervisors support, which actually helped us financially pay the tuition for those kids. And then shortly on the heels of that, we applied for the Mixed Delivery Grant. The Mixed Delivery Grant is actually the state of Virginia's grant, runs through the Virginia Early Childhood Foundation. The purpose of that grant is really to help counties across the state actively better understand both their financing and access to preschool services, with the idea that they really wanted to provide money to increase that access and to better identify early on kids that were at high risk and not doing well in school. And so we had that grant, and at the same time, there was actually in November of 2018 an application made by our new CAP agency for an early Head Start grant, where CCLC would have been a vendor. The grant would have included several counties, including Rappahannock County, for kids from 0 to 2. And that grant, unfortunately, was declined. And we don't have really good reasons for that at this point. I don't believe it means that we cannot pursue through our CAP agency future funding opportunities. But at this point, there was really no direct way for CCLC or RCPS to kind of apply for a grant on our own. And as we go into a slide a little further, I can tell you a little bit about what happened when we tried to explore what happened for the cancellation of Head Start and what we've done in an effort to have that reinstated. But just to bring us up to date, we were granted $250,000 for 2 years of preschool services and 6 months of planning in January of 2018. In February 2018, because we were Mixed Delivery Grant participants, the First Step collaboration was also granted the Preschool Development Grant. It was not a lot of money that came along with that grant, but as many of you probably know, that Preschool Development Grant was the state's, many states' opportunity to really better explore how they could fully fund preschool within the state. And it has, I believe, and I believe that the superintendent would agree, it's put us in a very, very good position to be having discussions at the state level about what we need in the county and what's happened to us and our efforts to be able to kind of fully fund an effort where we could bring all kids ages 3 and 4 into preschool. Next slide. So in terms of program successes, we have served 96 kids in 2 school years. And that is, I believe, a phenomenal number. I can tell you that I was at a mixed delivery conference about a week and a half ago with our program director for CCLC, who's in the audience tonight, by the way, Lisa Pendleton. And we realized kind of belatedly that we had more kids enrolled through the mixed delivery program than Southwest Virginia, that includes 5 counties through the 39-weight program, and through Page County and Harrisonburg, Rappahannock County, and also Albemarle County. No one has enrolled as many kids as we have in the last 2 years of mixed delivery grant. And I think that we've been able to do that both because we have a very strong collaboration with the school system. Some of the barriers in other counties have to do with transportation. The school system doesn't provide transportation. They have multiple vendors, and so they've had to use some of their mixed delivery grant money in other counties to be able to pay to contract with someone to transport kids to the programs. We haven't had that problem here. And we've also not had the struggles with trying to kind of be able to prospectively pay for things and then draw down money. Our relationship with the school's fiscal agent has been very satisfactory for us. We bill on a monthly basis for tuition services, and it's been pretty seamless. I think the other thing that we are very proud of is that last year we had 1 Latina student at CCLC. This year we have 4 Latina students at CCLC, coming from non-English speaking families. And again, going back to our earlier conversation, we feel that if we're really working actively to have kids ready by age 5, we need to really be looking at the children in this county that are coming in to kindergarten, first grade, and later grades with language barriers to being able to kind of learn effectively. So the other thing that I wanted to just point out about this slide is that I think, as I've said before, we have really both been a partner to RCPS. They have also, I think, over time really developed an interest in having some of the children that they have been serving at CCLC for inclusive services. And it's just been a very, very strong relationship with us that I think the kids have really benefited from. So there have also been some really pronounced program challenges. When you have 96 kids and you have 3 classrooms, 2 at CCLC, 1 at RCPS, you're talking about an average of 18 and a half children across each classroom. The ideal number would be about 15. And with large classrooms comes lots of challenges with being able to kind of organize your time and the classroom and your daily schedule in a way that allows you to both move kids through the things that you need to get done in order to be an effective teacher, but also to deal with some pretty pronounced behavioral challenges. In our end, we have been able to kind of resource our classrooms with 3 teachers, and I think in the school system, though, they have not been able to do that. They've had 2 teachers actually dealing with 20 children, I believe, in her class this year, 22 the previous year. So we haven't turned anybody down for participation in preschool, but by not having turned anybody down, we have kind of created some additional need for training, some additional needs for staffing, some additional expenses that I believe were not initially anticipated with the mixed delivery grant work. The mixed delivery grant funds of $100,000, they only covered 13 of the 28 children that we accepted for the 2019-2020 school year. State average for tuition is about $10,500. CCLC's full-time tuition is about $10,000 a year. So if you take a look at that, 28 children is $280,000 worth of tuition. We had about $130,000 in funds from the NDG. The rest of those funds, the rest of those funds were actually generated by both fundraising on the part of our board members, who are very, very active fundraisers. We were lucky with that. And some really wonderful participation from the foundations in the area, Northern Piedmont Community Foundation and also CAP, were very, very supportive of us. But obviously that is not a sustainable source of funding over time. And so some things have happened actually in the last few months that have suggested to us that we need to be looking for more sustainable sources of funding and really thinking about how we can kind of leverage what we are able to do in terms of fundraising with other funds that might be available from the county. So for example, I just wanted to point out for FSC revenue, in our first year, our revenue always, we bill our tuition services $10,000 a child, actually encompasses the cost of being able to provide those services to kids. So this gives you an idea both for our first year and our second year, really what the revenue that we needed to be able to provide these services and how it's broken out. So you can see in year one, the Board of Supervisors provided more than 50% of the money that we needed to be able to kind of operate that year. Donations accounted for about another 23%, and then grants and the child care assistance funds for a lesser amount of money. The Child Care Assistance Fund in year 2 became very valuable to us. I see our partner from DSS, Jim Parker, sitting in the audience today. We realized actually shortly after I started at CCLC last year that we were not making as good of use of child care assistance funds as we could have. And so we started rerouting families prior to asking for scholarship from us that they needed to actually apply for child care assistance through DSS. And our partner actually kind of fast-tracked those families, so we were able to, in a very short period of time, make up a significant difference of the gap that we had between what we were able to get in year 2 from the mixed delivery grant and what we needed to be able to cover 28 children in preschool. So the bad news is, that CCA has been frozen. That grant is actually part of a federal grant called the Child Care Block Grant. And that block grant actually has been, for a period of time, underutilized in Virginia. What we actually happened onto last spring were a lot of kind of unused slots and some goodwill on the part of the state to be able to kind of reallocate slots to Rappahannock County. But even so, our child target number, the limit of slots that they would allow Rappahannock was 39 last year, were frozen this year, and they've reduced it to 32, unless something has changed it. Yeah, and so what that means is that we are already beginning to have families that are not going to get CCA, they're on a waiting list, that want their kids to come in for infant and toddler services for next year, that are going to need scholarship, real scholarship from us. And so we will not be able to, probably next year, hopefully something will break after that, be able to kind of fund at the level that we funded this year with the funds that we're able to raise, because we have the younger population that we're going to have to cover. So where does our money go? Like most school systems, you can see that most of our money, about 85% of it, and what's billed under tuition services, goes to personnel costs. And again, it's very heavily regulated in Virginia. We are licensed through the Virginia Department of Social Services, and we are also participants with Virginia Quality, and we're also subsidy providers. All of those things are requirements of participating in the mixed delivery grant. And so what that means is that for preschool-aged children, the ratio is 1 to 8. So as we did this year, we had 18 kids in one class. As soon as you go over 16 children, you have to have another teacher in the room. And that works for the ratios that are established for each age group. So it's a little bit of a burden for a good reason, but it does kind of mean that there are certain fixed expenses being a licensed child care provider that you just cannot get around. The other thing that we had in our first year of operation that was an additional expense is in order to participate as a Head Start program, you have to have a case manager. We had a family support coordinator that we employed full-time who met with families, ran our parenting classes, made home visits. You know, she was really a wonderful asset to our organization. But we had to make some tough decisions this year. Either we accepted 28 kids, or we had a family support coordinator, accepted many fewer children. And we ultimately selected to go ahead and bring those kids into our preschool program. So that's pretty much it. Hard choices, but we felt ultimately that we didn't want to turn anybody who had applied for preschool away. So where does funding for child care come? My background is actually in child welfare, and it's a much more generous program, particularly in foster care. It's uncapped, basically. So you can draw down a certain percentage based on your, I can't even remember the terms now, the penetration rate of TANF. loosely, to be able to kind of draw down money, and it's an ongoing entitlement on the part of states. The child care funds do not work that way. There's one major federal funding source, that's the federal Head Start program, and then there are a few other things that kind of provide support to states. The second largest amount of money is going to states through the Child Care Development Block Grant. We talked about that a little bit. That's actually child care assistance funds. Those come to states as one big block of money, and the states make their own formula for how those slots are distributed. And often those slots are distributed based on previous history. So if you had a lag time, 3 years perhaps, where you weren't asking for slots, what will happen is that your rate then gets set based on previous experience. It becomes really a little hard to kind of be able then to kind of get the state to allocate more resources over time. But again, Jen did a very good job this year, and we're certain that as we go forward with our lengthening waiting list for CCA, that the state will take some action once additional funds are released. So the federal child care food program is also another source of revenue. CCLC is a nonprofit provider. We have about 60% of our kids that participate in our programs are there on full scholarship, and so we do subsidized breakfast, 2 snacks a day, subsidized lunch. We get a fairly good, about 15% of the amount of money that we spend on food comes back to us through this program, and there are other ways of kind of drawing down money too. It's not a substantial amount of money, but it makes a big difference in our monthly food budget. And then finally, there's the Virginia Preschool Initiative, which again is Virginia's method of being able to encourage counties to provide preschool services to at-risk kids. Unfortunately, Rappahannock County lost BPI several years ago, and then on top of that, we lost Head Start. So there's some good news perhaps coming down the pike around BPI, but at this point, it's still part of the governor's budget, and Shannon plans to talk more about this later. Some encouraging signs, but we're not sure where things are going at this point.
Right, and I can just add that
Yeah.
we are very excited that Virginia Preschool Initiative funding did open back up for us. We are now again eligible. And I feel like that is a big result of the mixed delivery project and really getting our children on the map, getting those numbers out there, our communications with the state. So that's a huge deal. And not only that, if it's okay, I'll interject here with this because it fits very well. But what's new in Virginia Preschool Initiative is very interesting. So they're also trying to utilize state funding sources, BPI funding being one of them, as well as the Head Start dollars and other mixed delivery grants, PDG grants and things, to figure out this idea of, and the concept of, well, where do you draw the line? Who's responsible? What is the responsibility of the state and the locality around early childhood and preschool services and early interventions and all those things that we know statistically show, all the benefits. So Virginia Preschool Initiative, not only do we have basic aid in the governor's budget right now, and that looks to be pretty well protected, everything I'm looking, knock on wood, and all these on the House and Senate amendments and all the bills going through, seems to be like it's stable, so that's good. In addition, the Department of Education has opened up resources to expand on Virginia Preschool Initiative, and we have been invited to get the training and the webinars to not only expand BPI, also continue to develop public-private partnerships through our BPI initiative. Also pilot a three-year-old BPI classroom. Traditionally, it had only been 4-year-olds. So those are 3 separate applications that we are now eligible for, in addition to a waiver for unused slots for BPI. So that we now have access to. We don't yet know how that's going to pan out because we're going through a series of webinars. I just finished another one this week on how we're going to access it. So as soon as that is opened up, don't worry, we will be in that application applying. But it's exciting because before we didn't even have access, we were ineligible. The application from the state wasn't even open to us through our portal that we have to use through the Department of Ed. So now it is. So that's great.
I would just say in general, the Mixed Delivery Grant has been wonderful for us. It's a wonderful learning community. It puts you kind of right at the center of what's happening at the state when they're trying to actually figure this piece out too. That house needs, we're going to actually fully support counties in being able to provide preschool services. Some of what they're talking about is maybe a year or 2 away. So for example, instead of being Department of Social Services providers, there's also activity at this point, recommendation. to move childcare over to the Department of Education, which I think would actually be very good for us. It would both open us up to kind of perhaps more stringent standards for preschool, but the value of that is that we would then be much better able to kind of share our data on how kids are doing in preschool and the advantages of having preschool prior to kindergarten as part of the overall PALS database. Okay. So Head Start eligibility, I get this question a lot. What happened with Head Start and why can't you reapply for it? And so I think the easiest answer for that is that Head Start grants are not open to the public. Head Start grants are published in November each year. Sometimes they're published a little bit off cycle, but mostly they're published in November. And those grants are usually because there's been some initiative to kind of pinpoint a population they feel is more in need. And so right now, the thrust of the grants that Head Start is providing are early Head Start expansion grants, meaning they are looking for CAP agencies that already are running early Head Start programs, and then they're providing opportunities for those organizations to be able to kind of apply for expansion to add new counties, new populations of kids, like the People Inc. grant that happened in November of 2018. We understand from some of our HHS partners that there were going to be additional opportunities for early Head Start expansion grants coming up. But we do not know when that will happen, and we are not going to be in a position to actually apply for it directly. We can perhaps kind of be a vendor for one of these, but it's not something that we can actually get online and then apply for. We also wanted to talk a little bit about some of the dynamics that led to the grant ending. I know that some of you were actually involved in kind of the initial correspondence with Senator Mark Warner's office that happened probably at the end of the year 2018. And that resulted in actually kind of the comment you see to the left. We eventually got a letter of response back to our request for information about why the program was terminated and what efforts we could make to appeal that decision. We were basically told that Skyline CAP had made that request back in 2015. They made that request based on annual assessment, both of our data and the enrollment data, and that as the grantee, they were the only party that had an appeal right. And so it was just straight, no, you can't appeal it. There were no appeal rights available for you. We attempted right after that actually to get a meeting just to be able to talk about kind of what other opportunities might exist, and we were not able to be successful with that either. So it looks to us as though the way forward is to look for new opportunities, but there's no reinstatement potential for Skyline CAP. And in fact, Skyline CAP, if you look, they just had their grant for the preschoolers actually is just up for renewal. When you get to a certain point and you're in good standing with Head Start, you get renewals with no competitors, and that's what happened with their grant this year. It was actually put on public notice, but it wasn't open for outside bidders. So they submit their grant, it's going to be a rollover grant for them. I would say that it's not as bad as it sounds. One of the things that, I think we can go to the next slide. One of the things that is really not helpful for us with Head Start, should it come back, is the reimbursement rate. Again, it's about average cost of care is $10,000. Head Start in Virginia pays $8,000. They also require you to have a BA level teacher. They also require you to have a case manager on staff. All of those things are expenses that Head Start requires but does not compensate for. And the Head Start expansion grants are not being routinely authorized. And so what that means is that even were we able to kind of get linked into an existing grant, we would not be coming in as a new grantee. They would have to kind of pull out money within an existing grant to be able to fund us. So I hope that's clear. It's a little confusing even to me. We also found that one of the problems with Head Start, we look at our data a lot because we participate in the Neighborhood Assistance Program, and we also participate in a lot of other types of programs like the USDA food program that require us to do family household income. Up until this year, Head Start really was looking at populations of kids that were very needy. They were homeless. They were kids whose parents were on public assistance. They were kids that had already an existing IEP. And they were kids that had to be at 100% of the federal poverty level. In 2020, that amount went up to 200% of the federal poverty level, but you're still talking about a maximum income level of $21,000 for a family of 3. So it's a very, very, very low bar for kids that can qualify on the basis of income. And that's actually what happened to us the last go-around. We did not have enough families in Rappahannock County that met that very, very strict definition of poverty. We have a lot of families in Rappahannock County, many of whom were serving as CCLC, that fall somewhere between that 120% of poverty mark, 130% poverty mark, up to 300% poverty. But we do not have a lot of families that are, really at that much lower standard. So it's a good news, bad news situation. There are a lot of pros for being a Head Start site, but we do have a lot more flexibility being a mixed delivery grant site. Gives us the opportunity for partnership, the opportunity to expand, to be able to kind of craft the program the way that we want to. The BPI as a funding source is actually much more liberal in the eligibility requirements than Head Start is, so we think in combination, the two of those will give Rappahannock County a better way to kind of fund our demographics. Okay, so for recommendations, what we would like to think about going forward into the next year, this is actually going to be, we're going into our last year of mixed delivery grant funding for this cycle. New cycle will begin again in November. We are going to make application for that in addition to any other sources of funding through BPI that might be available to us. But we think for this upcoming year that the best way that we can move forward, if you look at the average number of kids that are applying each year, which is about 48 one year, I think it was 42 the year prior to that, so about an average of 44 kids, roughly, that the best way to be able to support those children would be to actually open a BPI classroom, but to maintain the current preschool classroom that you have in our CPS. That would allow a couple of things to happen. One of which is it would allow almost immediately for Shannon to be able to kind of reduce the number of children she has in each of those preschool classes to about 15. And then CCLC would not have a burden of taking on close to 30 kids. We would be back at around 14. We're going to have carryover going into next year that should be able to pay for 11 of those kids' tuition. And we would seek today kind of the difference, which would be $30,000 or $10,000 for the 3 children at $10,000 that we would take. And of course that would be completely after the enrollment process happens and we have a better understanding of who's enrolled and how many kids we have next year. We would also really strongly encourage kind of a set-aside be developed. We have other participants in the preschool process that are coming on board. Both Bellevue and Hearthstone are actively working to be part of the universal application and enrollment process here in Rappahannock County. Neither one is currently working with Virginia Quality, which is one of the mixed delivery grant requirements. But probably by this time next year, they will also both be very interested in participating. But all of us share kind of one problem, which is that there are always many more applicants than there are scholarship funds available. So that's going to be true for any provider that's doing this work for the public benefit, but kind of with limited resources. So the other thing that I would say is that the MPG funding is never certain. We are in a really good position for it because we've been very active partners, and I think they've been very pleased with the work that we've done, and we've had very encouraging words about going forward with the mixed delivery grant next year. We have already been accepted as a site for the preschool development grant in this upcoming year. I think that's a 2-year cycle. So it's also Virginia Early Childhood Foundation. So I think that they are pleased with our work and what we've been doing. And I think that it's not a slam dunk, but I think we have a very good chance of being able to get that grant. If that happens, beginning in the subsequent school year, we'll again have $250,000 to be able to cover the expenses of this reduced number of children that CCLC could serve. The next slide actually just kind of shows you just some budget projections for this upcoming year. We'll have about $112,000 of carryover and then money that was actually budgeted for next year. We're estimating a small amount for CCA funds going into next year. And so the county ask would be $30,000 to be able to kind of run a classroom. For 21-22, again, that would be an MDG. This is best case scenario. That would be fully covered by the amount that we have in the MDG. And then the following year, again, we would have the county ask, but it would be a little bit reduced at this point because the level of carryover we estimate will be a bit higher. And that's because we hope at that point we're estimating a higher source of revenue with the CCA funds. We hope that whatever has been frozen at that point, that will be resolved. And so the next slide is just really kind of a worst case scenario. And this is really just here to kind of illustrate kind of the cost of preschool services and really how much we rely at this point on both the mixed delivery grant and other sources of public funding. If we did not get the mixed delivery grants, we're going to have roughly $140,000 in tuition services, and about $50,000 of that CCA can cover for both years. We believe the CCA funds would be able to cover an additional $20,000 and $30,000 in year 1 and year 2, but the ask would certainly be higher. We go up to about $70,000 in 2021. 22, and then up to down to 61.2 in 2022 and 23. So just out there to kind of illustrate the cost of providing this kind of valuable service. We don't believe that will be necessary, but good to know. Thank you. Do you have any questions for me?
I do.
Yes.
So on the recommendations page, so there are currently 3 classrooms. Two at CCLC and 1 with us. And on the recommendations, the first one speaks of a second classroom. So 4 classrooms is what's proposed in this.
Actually, we're proposing to do 3 classrooms, but 2 of them will be at our CPS next year. We'll do 1 classroom at CCLC.
Okay. So I guess what I'm trying to do is make sure I understand these numbers, these estimates that we're projecting means what to us as far as the number of students that we're going to be able to facilitate.
It means that we're seeing this trend typical over the last 2 years, so we want to keep that stable. So at the very least, keep it at 44 children is what we're averaging. Right. So we'll be able to handle that capacity.
So there's no worst case for 2020, 2021. Does that mean it's the same as the best case, and why?
For this upcoming school year?
Yeah.
The best case scenario is that if we are able to get support from the Board of Supervisors and School Board today, and with that and the amount of carryover that we have, we would be able to cover a full classroom of kids at CCLC.
I'm not sure what you mean by support today.
It's just, we're not at the beginning of our budget cycle yet.
Right.
I wondered, the scenarios don't seem to take into account the Virginia Preschool Initiative being restored. I was wondering, is that just because it's in such a formative stage that it hasn't been accounted for yet?
Partly, and also because the VPI funding will come to us through direct aid in our budget, so we do plan to absorb the cost of that in our current budget if possible. So, and that's the plan right now.
That would be directed to the second class.
Correct.
Here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure on that same recommendations page if I'm confused or not, but if Bellmead and Hearthstone are getting in, does that mean there's additional children that we're expecting in the county? Or is this direct competition in what you guys already are serving?
Yeah, it would actually be kind of, they would be entering into the same process of competing actually for the classroom that we have. Yeah.
And part of the mixed delivery criteria too, in developing these, yes, it does require us to do that, but part of that public-private partnership is to give also parental choice and the availability of other providers. So the parent does have an active role in choosing where their student is able to go, as long as it meets those guidelines that are set forth. And we have seen some real positive growth in that area and developing a new professional learning community among our early childhood educators. It has been very important in increasing the quality of early childhood education. Which really gets us all on the same page. We're speaking the same language. We have the same tools for observation. It helps us know and engage the metric for which kids need to be able to be successful at kindergarten, which is what the public schools really have a huge interest in, because every year you miss, it gets much more costly, and it takes 3 times more intervention to get them just on a level playing field. So it's much harder. So the earlier we intervene is critically important to them.
Lisa, I have a couple of questions. The first one dovetails with what Ms. Donahue just asked, I think. Just looking across the landscape of the education market in Rappahannock County, we have Hearthstone, Belmead, Wakefield Country Day School, Public School, CCLC, and Baby Bear Daycare, which also plays an important role for young children. And my question is, and I feel bad asking this because you've already alluded to the fact that you're maxed out in terms of number of children in a classroom, but it's a question of, is there an opportunity for benefiting from economies of scale and closer coordination across all of these institutions? And we've already talked about Belmead and Hearthstone. I also recognize their challenges in the sense that we're talking about different educational philosophies. You have Montessori and you have classical education at Wakefield Country Day School, Waldorf education at Hearthstone. So maybe you could just expound a little bit on what efforts are being made to increase this coordination across all these institutions.
Yeah, so the preschool development grant is really about that coordination, building kind of both a learning community and actually moving your providers to increase the quality of care. And so in this past year, we've actually worked directly both with Baby Bear, with Belmead, and more recently with Hearthstone to really think about how they could become engaged in Virginia quality, how they could actually begin to participate in the class observation process, and in the case of Belmead, how they could become a licensed subsidy provider. The preschool development grant and the mixed delivery grant require, when the school system is using providers for preschool outside of the school systems, you have to meet certain standards, and those standards really are about being able to kind of assess what you're doing, being able to kind of pass licensing requirements, being able to kind of be willing to pass requirements to become a licensed subsidy provider, and finally being willing to kind of work with Virginia quality. And everybody's at different stages of that at this point, but we've had a lot of interest from both Hearthstone and Belmead. At the time that we initially approached Wakefield, which is a very fine preschool program, by the way, they all are, they were in a position, not in a position actually to participate. I understand more recently that they've expressed some interest in becoming a subsidy provider. Again, I think all of us that are providing preschool are struggling with the level of scholarships that were being requested for families in the county that are trying to have their kids in preschool.
My second question, and by the way, I want to mention how pleased I was to meet with you and Miranda Hope, one of your board members, and to tour your facility. I'm fortunate to represent the Hampton voting district, in part because of the things that are located within it, and CCLC is obviously a bright, shining star within our district.
Thank you.
Yeah, the facility looks great, and I know that you have a very active board that does a lot to really constantly improve facilities. Because the $30,000 request is really directed for basically supporting 3 student spots at CCLC, some of these numbers are in your presentation, but just to be clear, how many total employees do you have currently?
26 employees.
26, and your total enrollment again?
Our total enrollment is at 100 now.
Okay, and the cost per student you said is approximately $10,000.
At the preschool level for full-time, it's more expensive for infants and toddlers.
And then how many, currently, just off the top of your head, how many families are paying full tuition, partial tuition, or none at all? How does that break down?
Yeah, so as I said earlier, about 60% of our families are more or less receiving full tuition through scholarship, through CCA, through some combination of the two. We have very few families that pay full tuition. That's a negotiation that happens at the time the family enrolls their child. It's based on their income and their need, and we negotiate that. And because we are a nonprofit, and again, we have a very active board that's very engaged in doing fundraising, we've been able to kind of to make that work. We increase our tuition on an annual basis by 2 to 3%. We really can't go above that. Families can't afford it. And we feel like we are doing a service to be able to provide childcare and preschool for working families in the county that are not earning a lot of money.
And that's such an important point because we're all constantly talking about how incrementally we can balance our demographics. And I don't say that to offend the older members of our audience tonight, but I think we're all aware of the skewed demographics in Rappahannock County, and clearly any infrastructure, education, or otherwise we can provide to keep young working families in the county is really critical. And I congratulate you on your work in this regard, and also the work of the public school and both of your boards.
Thank you.
And it's been correct that all of the students at CCLC end up coming into Rappahannock schools and or they're in our parks. So we're benefiting directly in these schools from supporting the students who will be at CCLC. Is that correct, or do they go to other places? They go off to Wakefield sometimes. Is that?
We occasionally lose people to childcare centers close to parents' places of employment, but no, they're Rappahannock County residents by and large, and so their children are going to public schools.
I've heard varying statistics about an investment of $1 in early childhood can save a lot, go up the line, and think about mental health, you think about the needs of specialists in classrooms, which are state mandates that are often not funded. I feel like that should be part of our calculus of looking at setting aside an amount for a few kids so that we can maintain the service for everybody.
I consider it more of an investment.
An investment, yeah, it's like a foundation
Really
for a house or something.
It pays a lot of percentage dividends later on.
Can you help me understand the difference between the total cost for school year 21, 22, 22, 23, and then 2021? 14 kids, total cost, 140,000, 10,000 per kid, that makes sense. But that is not the same for 2020, 2021. Why do 14 kids cost 151,000 next year?
It's just actually, what you've seen with that is some calculations on how we believe CCA will grow. And we're basing that on the fact that we have families that are getting CCA now, but whose kids are at a younger age that would then number grade out in, would carry their CCA with them. And so we have more revenue coming in, that revenue then would be carried over to the next year, reduces the burden on the ask.
So I guess that's the end of my question. Why is it 30,000 and not 350?
Okay, for the upcoming school year?
Yes. To make the total $140,000.
I don't know, perhaps my math is wrong, but I think actually that Shannon and I talked about this, and I agree to it.
I believe it was the direct cost that CCLC had with those certain students, because you had said that the tuition rate for the upcoming year would have been different if CCA had continued, if I recall.
Yeah, that's what's happened at this point is that we have very few participants actually in our threes that are coming up to fours that are going to be eligible for CCA because of the threes. And so the $151,000 that you see in the revenue that we are generating, we technically pay for 15 kids, right? And it could pay for 15 children if we end up with that number of children that come through. We've been working kind of on this average, so we believe that probably the class size will be 14. But the difference between those two will carry over to the following year and provide some, I think, wiggle room in case CCA has not come back at that point. So again, with the CCA numbers, it's been such a benefit to us. The freeze is really going to have pretty, it's going to be very, very difficult for us to be able to kind of raise the revenue we need next year to be able to kind of support both our preschoolers and also our younger children. My apologies for not making that clear. Yes?
And of course, no decisions have to be made today, but we wanted to have this joint discussion because it does have an impact on both budgets. It's a very important community discussion about the role of preschool and what the locality's responsibility is to invest in early childhood. And also, do we believe in what we've created in this collaboration with the mixed delivery? We think we have created something a lot better than what we could have done had we gone a different route. So with our recommendations, there's a lot to consider. When I talk about budget blocks, building blocks later. We will talk about that, but our plan is if we were to have a second classroom, it would be absorbed in our budget. So as part of the BPI funding being funneled toward that through basic aid. So it wouldn't be an additional ask for that classroom to add to our current staffing.
In a way, losing Head Start is a bonus.
Yep. Maybe.
Well, it allowed us.
No.
It allowed us to
I
serve more.
think what we have now is better than what we had.
Give that to better.
A blessing.
A blessing.
A blessing.
Anything
Thank you
else?
very much. I appreciate the opportunity. This is my first opportunity to present to you guys, and it's a little nerve-wracking. But it's wonderful. So it's really been a wonderful program for us, and we're so appreciative that you're using the first round of support to be able to manage this work. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Concludes the superintendent's reports and during the joint session.
Looks like we've already done questions and discussion. Is there more questions and discussion about these two items that we just heard about?
I had a few questions because I think I'm the only member of the Board of Supervisors here tonight that voted for the Head Start funding initially when it came through. And it was when the request came up from the school fund it. And it was my understanding that we were going to change who we partnered with in trying to pursue that further and try to get that reinstated.
Absolutely.
And allowing the funding to get it reinstated was really why the supervisors, I believe, that voted to fund it, voted to do so, was that there was the idea that the funding would be reinstated. And I think we find ourselves in a really challenging position now with that funding not reinstated. And so I guess I'd like to know, it seems like we're still alive with Skyline Cap in this pursuit, and I did think that there was talk about switching it up at some point, and I don't feel like I have those details squared up.
Okay, we did talk a little bit about that. So People Inc. is the CAP agency we are now going through to pursue that avenue. They are eligible to apply for Head Start funding. We are not, as a community, as a school system. CCLC cannot. We are only contracted services, basically a vendor. They don't even have to tell us if they're reallocating funding or anything. We're a vendor. So just like if you go to do HVAC person and said, okay, sorry, next person. That's how it works with that. They don't have it. It's not a nice thing to do, but it's that's the way it can work, and legally that's the right. And they were correct in their data. We did find that they were correct in the stringent conditions of Head Start. It was not our program. We didn't have oversight other than providing in-kind services, a space, and some transportation, which we added in later to help with some barriers that they had told us about, but that was the only barrier we had known about. The memorandums of understanding kept coming through even for that school year. So our initial hope was, yes, if we switch partners, maybe we can try to arm wrestle this money back into the county. And not that simple, but not a pursuit that we're giving up by any means. And by going through the early Head Start process and applying, and Jennifer Parker from DSS as well, now helping us with that too. So would you like to add to that?
I'm just going to just let you know that I was at a People Inc. board meeting recently, and they are going to pursue their early Head Start grant again in this new application period. We were denied the last one, but they are going to try to seek the early Head Start. They can't get anywhere with getting our Head Start program back because of the data that's in place and because Skyline Cap has our money and has us kind of tied up into their program. So it's going to take a while to unravel Rappahannock County from Skyline Cap. But in the meantime, People Inc. is pushing forward and trying to get the early Head Start program established here in hopes that you regrow Head Start off of that. So we are working.
So when you say unravel away from Skyline Cap, is based on your experience, is it a 5-year adventure, a 2-year adventure? I mean, they've got money that was previously committed that we were using in their budget and we're not going to get it because it's committed there. How long until it's not committed there?
It's really going to be up to the feds and Head Start. And primarily it's going to be based on when more money is going to be allocated to Head Start, and there's a little bit of a surplus that they can say, okay, Rappahannock, you can have some money and do your own thing with People Inc. right now. But until that funding source increases, we're just kind of just sitting out there, and because our money has been reallocated to Skyline Caps other programs that have the data to support the need that we don't. But as we grow early Head Start and the data that we're pulling from First Steps, we're showing more and more that we actually do have these children, and we do have children at risk, and we do need our program. So it may take a few more years for us to be able to say, we have it, we really need it, and we have to have it back. I don't know if that's going to be 3 years or 5 years or 10 years.
It's out of the way. We have to decide as a community what we're going to do between now and then.
Right.
And so that's really the question that's on the table. What are we going to do for the next 5 years while we're waiting for this money to become available again? Right? That's where we're at. I think.
And then I guess I wonder also if there's other entities that are going to be entering, the competitive market to have these students. What kind of challenges does that present to the system? And what does that local landscape look like in the near future?
And that's a great question and a fair point, and one that Mixed Delivery did think of, and that's why they helped. And something we had already started with our Head Start program with Skyline is creating a streamlined application process where it's a single application for all preschool services. It also takes out subjectivity and that competitive edge when you're looking at scoring on a sliding scale, at-risk factors, and so we use the same rubric, same application. We score those applications accordingly and then place according to the best appropriate placement for the need. That would continue, and then the component of choice with the other providers as they come on could play a part in that. We can say we recommend you be placed in this setting because it best fits the needs based on your application. However, you can also have choice in that. So that was a requirement of the Mixed Delivery and Preschool Development Grant, and that's something we have established. And we do take that into consideration because ultimately we want everybody placed, no matter where it is, it's going to help, especially if we're all working together on that universal language. That makes sense.
I also was wondering, this relates back to the earlier presentation. My apologies, I thought we were addressing all the questions now, but I know at one point vaping was allowed on school property. Is vaping still allowed on school property?
Never. No ma'am.
Okay.
Did your son say that? We have teenagers trying to say things all the time.
That's not for my son. I mean, he's new to the high school this year, and that was where I understood it to be going on. So I just wanted to clarify that that's not something that I hope that they're picking up in school.
Oh, no ma'am, and that is not allowed, and it hasn't been, and now that they've increased the age too, so we don't have 18-year-olds thinking it's legal on school property, so no, in fact, vaping has been the #1 discipline incident that we've had, so we are really cracking down on that and catching students, and Hidden in Plain Sight will address that very thing, showing parents and teachers what these new vapes look like, because they can sit right in front of you and you won't even know.
And then it looks like, unfortunately, our presenters left, but I did wonder if there were any questions in the Pride survey that related to the media or also bullying, which I know there's a strong emphasis on in the Rappahannock County schools.
Yes, the Pride survey does address some bullying. I can't recall the questions at this point, but it does ask particularly about bullying.
Does anybody else have any questions?
I just have one. I know when I was on the board ages ago for CCLC, it was early 2000, we used to do the auction, and we actually bought auction items and I think resold them the next year because that's the way it worked in the county. So from a fundraising standpoint for Friends of CCLC, is that something that, I know you do the spring party, and is there another opportunity somewhere that maybe we're missing that could help Or are we just drained in the county with fundraisers?
I mean, I think the latter part may be partially true. But basically, we have both an annual drive that just ended, and I think probably we hit most of you up with a request for funding, and then we have a garden party. But we do fundraising throughout the year for people that want to come in and look at CCLC and to provide money for scholarships. And we raise a decent amount of money for that, but I think you'd be hard put to find any nonprofit in the county that could come up with $180,000 annually in support of a program. It just is too much money given all of the needs that we have within our student body.
Anyone else on the board have any questions?
Great presentation.
Thank you very much.
So I guess the next thing to discuss is this document. Yeah. So this is an information item for us to discuss at this table tonight, initially, before public comment, and that is the resolution that was in everybody's email or should have been available to you before the meeting. And I'm not sure, did you guys, is there a copy of it that was on the table on your way in? Do you have it? I'll read it to you just to get you ready for your night's rest. So at this point, it's our intention, I believe, to ask tonight for a motion for both of our boards to sign this joint plea for rural school divisions. And so this is a time to discuss that, if anybody wants to discuss that item. I appreciate Keir doing some wordsmithing. That was good work. Well done. Reads very well. Any questions or comments about it? Are you curious what it says? Are you? You'll be sorry. Joint School Board and Board of Supervisors resolution to support an increase in the state funding for small and rural school divisions is the title. It has our symbols on the top. Would you? Oh, that'd be great. As the resolutions go, a lot of whereas statements. Whereas Virginia's unemployment rate is the lowest it's been in the recent history at 2.8%. And whereas Virginia has been recognized as the top state in the United States to do business. And whereas Virginia has been designated as the 10th wealthiest state in the United States. And whereas Virginia finished last year with significant budget surplus of $230 million. And whereas over half of Virginia's schools were built more than 50 years ago, and over 28% of Virginia schools were built prior to World War II. And whereas state per pupil funding, after accounting for inflation, is down 8% from pre-Great Recession levels, despite the significant improvement in Virginia's economy. And whereas Virginia ranks 32nd in per pupil funding nationally. And whereas per pupil spending varies widely across Virginia, from 9,000 in some rural districts to 20,000 in suburban districts, with a statewide average in per pupil spending trailing the national average by approximately $1,800 per student. And whereas teachers are paid more than $9,000 less than the national average, which ranks Virginia 35th in the United States. And whereas since the Great Recession, localities have increased their share of public education funding by 2.9%, while the state has reduced its share by 3.3%. And whereas in Virginia's rural schools, where localities have seen the least post-Great Recession growth, those numbers are even worse. Rural localities have increased their share of education funding by 3.9%, and the state has reduced its funding to rural schools by 4.4%.
Whereas the national average for additional funding for high poverty students is estimated between 20 and 29%, and Virginia caps this funding stream at 16%. And whereas the research is clear that teaching students whose families live in poverty is more expensive than providing education to students of affluent families. And whereas all funding sources are considered, Virginia spends less on average on per pupil education in high poverty districts in the rest of the country, and whereas small and rural stakeholders believe pre-K through 12 public education is critical to the vitality of their localities and to Virginia as a whole, and whereas rural school subdivisions have seen a decline in pre-K through 12 enrollment of almost 24,000 students since 2009, which represents an 8% decline, and whereas 16% of students in rural school divisions live below the federal poverty level, and whereas 48% of students in rural school divisions are eligible for local and reduced price lunches, and whereas Rappahannock County is able to raise only approximately $150,000 by increasing property taxes by 1 penny, Virginia's 80 rural and or small localities have the collective ability to raise only $19,941,000 by increasing property taxes by 1 penny. And one urban and large Virginia district is able to raise more than $24 million by increasing property taxes by 1 penny. And whereas local poverty and limited tax revenues challenges rural and or small localities to fund schools at the same level as neighboring urban and large localities. We're to the punchline finally. Now therefore be it resolved that the Rappahannock County Board and Rappahannock County School Board and the Rappahannock County Board of Supervisors ask the Commonwealth of Virginia to adopt a budget that 1, reinstates the enrollment loss funding stream, 2, increases the at-risk add-on funding stream either through the Virginia Department of Education's proposed equity fund or in its current form. 3, fully funds teacher salary increases without burdening local taxpayers to enable rural and or small localities to retain and hire the best talent. And 4, provide state funding for school construction and renovation. Be it further resolved that we deliver this resolution to the state legislators representing Rappahannock County and also to the Senate and House Finance Committee chairs in the General Assembly of Virginia. Thank you very much.
So that's so that you know what we're talking about. And if there's any comments at this time, anybody?
I think it's a powerful thing to do in combination with other rural school divisions who have adopted very similar types of resolutions. We're not just doing this as Rappahannock County, right? We're doing it along with how many other, like 80 something?
There are 80 school districts in the Coalition of Rural Schools, and that's an organization that we've become part of, and the advocacy is really getting a lot of traction now, finally. They're even leading a press conference in Richmond this week. They've heard a lot from me lately at the House and Senate committees about rural funding, especially enrollment loss, and what a big piece of the puzzle that is for Rappahannock. So we'll have no problem getting them this as well. So we do ask that you sign that. It just it was very powerful that both chairs of both boards read that together to show that unification in the messaging. And
I think it's a great message too that it's going to come from Rappahannock, from both of our boards to the state, rather than just another resolution from another school board. I think it's appreciated. The joint resolution's appreciated.
And I would just say, as a new member on this board, I mean, I've lived here long enough that I know the acronym LCI pretty well. Every year we hear it, and more or less. But I'm really looking forward to us putting our collective thinking caps on to just do what we can as the coordinated boards to get beyond a resolution and actually find a resolution for the problem we face year after year after year, because the burden on taxpayers is significant. And I just want to make that commitment because it's something we really have to dive into. And I recognize it's not an easily solvable problem, but we got to keep trying.
I'd like to make a motion we adopt this resolution.
I think
We have to wait until 7.1.
The school's
Okay,
process
sorry.
is to read it in and then take action a little later.
Okay.
we're going to have some
Just trying to push it
discussion and then
Okay.
some public comment and then adopt the resolution.
All
actually be awake.
Relative to the LCI comment, and obviously it's been somewhat of a movable barrier for us, but all these other funding processes that at-risk add-on, they don't filter through the LCI, right?
Well, some of them, no, actually, some of them do filter through, but it would give us more impact for the percentage of the cap placed on it through basic aid SOQ funding, if that makes sense. So basically, okay, enrollment laws, I can go through each one. Enrollment laws will give us 100% of the $75,000 that that is given to school districts that lose, meets the 10-10-10 rule, which means, 10%, 10 years. So under 10,000 students, they have that sort of as a framework. There's a lot of language to change that, but the enrollment loss is our best chance of getting direct aid without filtering through the LCI. At-risk add-on is changing that formula as well, so we have yet to see how that formula is going to look exactly, but it has given us, it's raised about 33% in our at-risk by combining 3 different funding sources, including K-3 class size reduction, our at-risk add-on that was traditionally there, and then some other primary sources of funding. So that's going to combine those 3, lift it up about 33%, and then funnel through, so we do get much more direct aid that way. So it still plays a part in it, but not as big of a role as it did before with the equity fund, which is the new at-risk add-on, basically.
That's not a guarantee every year either.
No.
No, they can change those formulas on us at any time. So this was a direct, especially the at-risk add-on equity fund was a direct result of the Rural Schools Coalition, their advocacy on showing them what LCI does to rural localities and why, even though it's a funded mandate, it's very underfunded and in some cases unfunded mandates for rural schools because of that formula that we have no control over. So it's really neat to see that in the making and actually in the governor's budget and in the Department of Ed SOQ funding formulas. So we're making some ground, so in some headway.
If there's no other discussion amongst the board members, I think we'll go ahead and open up to public comment. If you'd like to come to the podium, state your name, the district that you are from, and keep your comments to about 3 to 5 minutes. We should be all set.
Good evening, boards.
Good evening.
And I'm from the Wakefield district, and I'm here to urge you to support CCLC's request for $30,000. The good news is there are children in Rappahannock County, contrary to rumor that there are none. And there seem to be an increasing number, and it may be that number are increasingly needy and require additional public funding and private funding. And I've been fundraising for CCLC for the last 40 years, I think, and we really beat every bush for every penny, and we're still coming short on these kids because you really need quality preschool providers. And on that note, CCLC is really a gem. It has certifications, national certifications that no other preschool or daycare has in the surrounding 5 counties, so we're incredibly lucky to have it. We are even luckier to have Dr. Shannon Grimsley, who for the first time since I've been involved with CCLC has really reached out to have a public-private partnership in a way that it's going to work, so it's working well for this county and it's going to work well for every kid in this county. I am, as always, grateful to the great Shannon Grimsley. But anyway, I think to keep kids. I remember hearing on the radio an Oklahoma legislator talking about supporting preschool initiatives in Oklahoma, and what he did was to compare the cost of preschool versus the cost of juvenile detention, which is where so many kids who don't have adequate preschool and socialization skills end up. So in the back of your mind, when you're thinking 30,000, think of what that could, how far that would go for a kid in juvenile detention, and it wouldn't last for but a couple of months, I think. So anyway, I urge you to support this. I think it's a great idea on any number of levels, both for the kids, for the private and public cooperation, and for the good of the county.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Anyone else?
Good evening, all of you. Gary Hampton. Two different things. One, this is the most positive thing I've seen come out of elected officials since I've been in Rappahannock. That resolution is very strong, and it's exactly where it needs to be. It's thoughtful, it's detailed, it's thorough, it's united, it's Rappahannock County. So thank you all for being able to come together and do something as powerful as that. I agree with the superintendent. I feel like my efforts on behalf of the school, my efforts on behalf of the county mean more to me tonight because you all are taking the right step. Now, on that score, with 250 letters supporting both boards from citizens directed to the same recipients as you're sending yours to, make any difference. If it does, then I think there's a way to put it in the newspaper. I think it's a way to work through other organizations. And I think we could probably generate a couple hundred letters in a week or two that would simply say, we support our Board of Education, we support our county supervisors. Pay attention to this resolution, please. For the sake of God, do something good for a while for our students here in rural counties. Something like that that might get their attention. But I suggest that as a way beyond what the public bodies have done, to let whoever reads that know that the people who vote for you all absolutely agree, and that you're speaking for the people of Rappahannock and the parents and the children of Rappahannock. I think that might help begin to move the needle a little bit. And we know in Rappahannock, every little bit goes a long way to helping the kid. So that's that piece. The other piece is chair of headwaters. Some of you remember that I got sort of in your face about those 18 kids a couple years ago. So thank you again that those 18 kids didn't just get abandoned. I share your concern, Ms. Smith, about not just giving up on Head Start. But in the interim, when there was no other alternative, I think everyone should be on that stage, should be applauded for the work that was done, again, collaboratively, so that we actually have a very, very strong preschool program. CCLC is to be applauded. Headwaters has given them money to support some of those kids in direct scholarship aid. We'll probably continue to do that. It's a sign of the collaboration of caring people in this county that we kind of pace it and put it together, and we grab it wherever we can so that the kids benefit. So I would ask, I know the budgets are tight. I hope that there's money to do this, but certainly those folks who've been at the front of this deserve a lot of credit for what they've been able to do in the last 2 years for our kids in this county, and I think it will make a difference. I know it will make a difference when they're in 5th grade and 8th grade and 12th grade, and for the rest of their lives. Let's keep trying to do what we can together. But thank you, tonight's been very positive, and I just hope that that spirit continues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else wishing to speak?
Going to sound like a broken record, but Betsy Deedle from Wakefield District. I was on the board of CCLC for a number of years, chaired it, now on the board of Path Foundation, and we have been shaking the bushes as hard as we can ever since I can remember at CCLC to raise money for the children of this county. What I saw tonight and what I've been seeing for the last couple of years, last 2 years, is collaboration that I think is really starting to pay off. And I think the roundtable that was mentioned, the behavioral health roundtable, is a great example of that. What you heard tonight from Dr. Grimsley and from Lisa Payne Wells is another example, and I think we need to build on that. What seems to me at the base of this issue of whether we support CCLC's request for $30,000 is a question of investing for the future. And it's not just investing in those 3 children, it's investing in children that will hopefully stay in this community, become active members of it. And so I ask you to think about that in the next couple of weeks while you're considering budgets. I also think that what was presented by the county board tonight and by the school board around advocating for education is a huge step forward. And I think I agree with Gary Achel that I think we could get you a lot of letters in the newspaper and a lot of letters to send in to Richmond, because that's the beginning of really making change in this county. So thank you very much.
Anyone else wishing to speak? All right, then there's additional public comment period regarding the 2021 preschool. In particular, if anyone has any additional comments to add. Then I declare the public comment period closed. At this time, we take other comments from the Board of Supervisors. If anybody has any other thoughts?
Madam Chair, I am wondering who this letter will be sent to, because I do know that our delegate and our senator already get it. It's not our representatives that I think need to hear this.
No, I think it might be, if we could turn it over to Shannon maybe to talk about the effort behind this letter and what the point of the whole exercise is. I think that would be instructive.
Absolutely. So the idea is just that, to get all the localities as best together. I think we're the only one so far that's done a joint resolution to this effect, which is great. But the idea is to get as many on board as possible, to send more letters and more resolutions to say this is important to us. Look at the ground we're already covering. We are not going to keep quiet because it is very unfair, it's inequitable, and it's hurting kids. Bottom line, and you're penalizing counties that have no control over that formula. So we're not going to give up that effort. So this resolution will be sent to the House and Senate committee chairs, who are directly responsible for the appropriation committees as they develop the budget. That's where we're focusing all of our energy, trying to get to them. So there is a list that I can also send out of people to send those letters to, and there's a good list of it, not only the committee chairs, but also everyone that sits on those committees. So as many as you want to write, we'll take them, yes.
And this was based kind of loosely on a framework provided by a rural schools coalition?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. They sent out the template to revise to address your locality, but all the data and stuff is supported, and you can go to their website and see their affiliations as well.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other board members with any questions?
We're ready to move on. We're at 7.1, correct? 7.1 on our agenda. So the way this is going to roll, we're going to get a vote from the school board and then from the supervisor separately. And, is there a motion at this time to approve the joint resolution for rural schools funding as presented this evening?
So
We have a motion, Mr. Uben. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Gray. Any discussion? All in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed, no? It's ordered.
Then I would need the same motion from the Board of Supervisors to approve the joint school board and Board of Supervisors resolution to support the increase in state funding that was presented this evening. Is there a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second?
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
It's on this thing.
Thank you very much, everybody. That takes us to, we do have one small housekeeping item for the Board of Supervisors on the agenda this evening. It's the Board of Supervisors action item. What we're referring to is G2. And we do have a bit of business to do in regards to the Page County contract. The change that we had initially thought we would make to the contract at the last Board of Supervisors meeting, we're needing to change that wording a bit. So in the interest of speeding this along, I would make a motion to authorize the board chair to execute the agreement with Page County, including the original language regarding hauling in the agreement. Specifically, that Rappahannock reserves the right to use other contract haulers at their sole discretion should Page County be unable to provide transportation services. And I say that in the form of a motion. I would need a second, please.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Chris. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Say the name of business, I'm not sure we have any, but the next joint meeting we need to discuss.
Oh, the next joint meeting.
Do you have ideas?
I did have an idea. I noticed when I looked at the calendar for our budget meetings, the April 20th budget meeting regarding the school budget, I was hoping that would be a joint meeting, and it looks like we only have that as a Board of Supervisors meeting this year, and I was really hoping that could be a joint exercise. It's my recollection that we had that as a joint exercise in the past.
It was usually earlier, if I recall,
It was in March.
March. It used to be in March prior to adoption of the budget, I believe, and then the school board has already adopted by then, by the April hearing.
I don't know if it would be useful to add another meeting in there and have that be the joint meeting, or just make that April 20th meeting a joint meeting, because it is a discussion of the adopted school board budget. I would defer to you all on what you think would be the...
This was fun. I think we should do
Well, my concern and my recollection from last year is that the Board of Supervisors, it was the Board of Supervisors meeting, and we had many members of the school board commenting, which is wonderful, and I enjoy to hear from everyone. However, it does at some point run the risk that if we engage in dialogue, that we might be construed as having an illegal meeting. And so it might be beneficial to make it just a joint meeting from the outset to encourage that kind of dialogue.
There's no reason not to.
The April 20th?
April 20th?
Yes, I think it's Monday, April 20th. And that would be my preference, and of course, you all can decide as you like, but I think it might be beneficial for everyone to have that be a joint meeting.
Comments? Good. We'll put it on the calendar.
Sounds good.
So the 20th is now going to be a joint meeting?
The 20th, you're right. 20th of April.
That will be the official public hearing for the budget, which changes can happen after that.
But not from us. By the time we get there, we've submitted
We
our
have
bottom
submitted
line
budget.
and sent you the letter, and this is what we're working with this year.
Well, and by June, we would adopt based on any revisions that
Right, but,
the appropriations.
right, based on changes, but the school board would not be changing things on April 20th.
You would be in a position at that point to suggest to the board why what the board has put out to public hearing meets or doesn't meet your needs.
Sure.
Now, if there was a thought to guide what ultimately is presented to the public for public hearing on the 20th, then you would have to meet much earlier and before.
But we already have a public hearing that we're responsible for before that. So I think it's a good idea.
Very good.
So we'll be in
the elementary school. Join us.
I have it written down.
The same time as this one. 7 o'clock.
7.
At 7 o'clock.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. And then at this point in the agenda, the next item of business is the adjournment of the Board of Supervisors meeting. If I could have a motion to adjourn, please.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Whitson, and a second.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Donahue. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
We're going to have a short recess while we say good night to some folks, and then we'll continue the school board meeting at item 10.1.
There's a clear conclusion in that. He wanted to hold something real.
Thanks.
He wasn't here, it just went so fast.
A lot of this community, I walked 20 minutes after that until they come to this.
That was nice. But you don't get my teachers appreciate it. They know what they Well, I know.
All right. All right, let's come back together and otherwise we'll be spending the night here. All right, opening comments. You know what I have to say. I've said it so many times I'm not going to repeat it. Adoption of agenda. I think we already did that. So I'm going to skip 10-2 because I think it's already a new point. Yes? Recognition of School Board Appreciation Month and Clerk and Deputy Clerk Appreciation Week. They only get a week?
They get a week.
They get a week and we get a month?
They get a week.
Hey. Hey, so we all received, right?
Yes, you had some gifts from
This
the...
was our appreciation, suitable for framing. Everyone got one, right? Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Feel so appreciated. Of course, this was given, you know, a lot of people have only been in office a month. They were appreciated just as much as so, anyway, appreciation. Also, I know that, I'm not sure how far this went, but there was a letter of appreciation sent to Mr. Ubin's boss.
Yes.
And to my boss.
Yes.
From the Virginia School Board Association. Your boss didn't get one. I'm just kidding. So
My boss picked it
your
up.
boss didn't get one either. So that was actually, you know, it's a really neat thing.
So that was
They got his title wrong, but it was pretty neat.
Good, that's good PR.
good, yeah,
Yeah.
good PR, but
Yeah, it was good.
I was like, you're trying to get the right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I actually have to submit paperwork every year for outside employment. So they track my outside employment.
Do they really?
Oh, sure.
We can move on? Yeah, donations?
Yes. So do you have this question?
I do.
Okay, Lisa and David Jones donated 2 mowers and a pressure washer to Mr. Hogan's class at the high school. Janice Palmer and Richard Saul donated $150 to the cafeteria donation account. An anonymous donor donated $1,000 to the baseball team. Harris Hollow Foods donated $1,500 to baseball advertising. And the rest of the donations are for the after-prom party, so I'm just going to read the name and what they donated. Headmaster's Pub, 10 play cards. J.M. Mack Properties, $25. Alice Butler, $20. Harris Hollow Foods, $200. The Inn at Little Washington, $250. Mike Farrell Group, $50. Rose Hill Veterinary Practice, $100. Shenandoah River Outfitters, 1 canoe day trip. Bell Ridge Farm, Mr. Grove donated 10 pounds of ground beef and $100. Country Chevrolet donated $1,000. The Robert Darby Foundation donated $500. The Marriott Ranch donated a trail ride for 2. And McClanning and Cameron donated an 8x12 custom cut mat. Lilo Looks, $25. Linda Clark, $20. And Cindy Giles, $30.
Thank you.
If I might,
Yes.
you know, Bob Darby moved 6 years ago
Yeah.
and is in Florida and is in a retirement home in Florida. And to his credit, he has never forgotten us. So that's really, if you happen to see him, thank you.
And we still send letters of appreciation.
Yes.
Thanks for these. It's a good idea. Thank you very much. Is there a motion to adopt the minutes from January 14th and 21st as they were presented to us in our packets? Do you have a motion for that?
So moved.
We have a motion, Ms. Bond. Is there a second? Second, Mr. Grove. Is there any comments? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, no. So ordered. Mr. Grove, do you have a chance to verify the bills?
I did. Everything looks fine. We're getting a great deal on propane. I mean, as Must be the bid process, but the price of propane was really cheap.
It's good to know.
That was great, yeah. And with a mild winter, we might have some money left over in there.
Well, we won't have to spend as much film as that.
Thank you.
All right, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? We have a motion, Mr. Rubin. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Ms. Meyer. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, no. So ordered. Madam Superintendent, again.
Yes, okay. The first item from these reports is the draft calendar for the school year 2020-2021. Ms. Carol Johnson was able to go through the same process with stakeholder meetings, send out a community survey, and the calendar that you see is very closely mirrors what we've done this year. It was very difficult to gauge how we felt about it because we haven't gone through this new calendar yet. But for the by and large, this was the winner. So we'll ask that be an action item for your approval. Any questions about that?
Any questions about the calendar as it was presented?
So we saw the survey, how did that come, there was a survey about the calendar, was that very decisive, what people?
It was much more decisive than last year. Last year, we
Last
actually
year was
sent
like
the
a
survey to get the
tiebreaker.
decisive
Yeah.
factor. And this
Okay.
time that helped us to do it proactively, so we were able to see very clearly this was the winning calendar.
It would be helpful, I think, if we put the number of school days on the calendar. I didn't see that, maybe I missed it. And the number of conference days and the number of professional development days. They're spread out, but there's no one place
Where you
that
say-
shows the
What?
parents for these things. That, you know, that
The
we
total?
have
Even if
two
you,
professional development days and so
on the
forth.
legend of it, you could say,
Pardon?
you could put it on the legend.
Yeah, it could go at the
You know.
legend someplace.
We could do that.
Yeah, I just think it would be
That's a
helpful.
good point.
And March 4, 5, and 8, those are just winter break, spring break?
Spring break, so this is the first, this year's calendar is doing the same thing. It broke up the school calendar into more dispersed days off for students and for teachers. And it also split up the Easter break, spring break,
That's
traditionally with a spring March break.
Which is
So-
a great idea.
Yes, well, we'll see how it goes. So we haven't lived through it yet, but we think it will be beneficial. So far, the feedback has been great about having the interspersed days for parent-teacher conferences and professional development.
Right.
And having those long weekends here and there for families. So far, it's been very positive.
And we'll vote on that later.
Yes, sir.
This evening.
Okay. And finally, just a budget update. This is the budget building blocks that we give each year. We've already done quite a bit of work in the last work session with establishing how the board's direction and where they would like us to build the budget. So vision and mission is always where we start and make sure that we're meeting our goals. The key considerations for this year's budget development are, of course, the staff increases, which always comprise the most of the cost of the budget as we're building it. The governor's budget, of course, has a 3% over the biennium. The Senate amendment that's up for consideration has a 5% year one of the biennium plus the governor's 3% year two. The House amendment initially had a 4.5% to 5% both years of the biennium, with the idea that this would help make some headway toward the national average of increasing teacher salaries to that point. Because as you saw in the joint resolution, how far behind Virginia is in achieving that, even though they're one of the top 10 for education in the country. So,
And these will be funded, of course, right?
well, not for us.
If they listen, 20%,
Maybe.
if you're lucky.
The latest iterations coming out of the amendments that I'm seeing right now have a more incremental approach to get teacher salaries to the national average by 2025. So the funding formulas that they will make in the supplemental basic aid for compensation, the compensation section, that will mirror that. Enrollment in ADM, of course, always a consideration for us, and we consistently keep seeing that trend to continue to decline. So that's a key consideration for us because that's how we measure our enrollment, our staffing, our revenue streams, and all of that. So
And we're sticking with 780.
780. I wish it could be more, but you know. Retaining, recruiting talented staff, of course, is we are asked a lot of our teachers. You saw what our prize survey says and what our classroom teachers now have to manage, and also have to be able to intervene and know what to do, provide services. At the same time, teach the content and achieve really high achievement scores, which we do year after year. So it's a testament to our teachers. Our teaching staff are the only people on staff that have a direct impact on student achievement. They're the only people. So we really need to invest in our teachers and make sure that I can tell you we have the hardest working staff around. The smaller we get, the more we're asking people to do for less. And you know, that's just the way small schools have to roll. We have a lot of dual endorsed teachers. Our administrators are all taking on additional reports, additional state requirements, additional duties, things like that. We've combined a lot of roles, as you'll see later on. And of course, we pride ourselves on having very effective, innovative programs. We want to continue that. Our capital improvement needs always have to be at the top of the priority list. We've made a great headway over the past few years. Mr. Curry and I have really gotten together to develop a 5-year capital improvement plan that makes sense. And we can, and Dr. Robin Bolt has been great in facilities, getting those bids in and estimates so we can see where the most dire needs are. We've made great gains. And, you know, knock on wood, we don't have any major capital needs for the next 5 years or so that are going to, you know, cripple the county financially. New state mandates, of course, we're always having to pay attention to. So the governor's budget is going to be built on the new local composite index. It is now 0.7996. That is an increase from last year. Remember, we had anticipated under the old formula that we would lose about $65,000 with that increase, because with an increase of LCI means more local ability to pay, less money from the state. But the governor's budget has reconfigured with the Department of Education's new funding formulas for equity and other line items. So the total difference projected in this governor's budget is going to be an addition of state revenue of $56,348, and most of that, just about all of it, geared toward early childhood and preschool. So that's where we can justify what we want to do with the preschool class. The enrollment loss funding is still not there. It hasn't been for the last couple of years. $75,000 a year, that's really impactful when we're building the budget. So we would love that to be reinstated.
That was voted on at the conference to reinstate.
Good. For VSBA?
Yeah.
Excellent. So VSBA is taking legislative action too to advocate for that. That would give Rappahannock, I think that's our best chance of getting the most money from the state under the current formula.
This 56K is based on 780.
Yes.
That's pretty good.
Yes. It really is. So here's the chart of our sad trend line showing our ADM continue to decline, enrollment steadily with it. So average daily membership, of course, is not enrollment. That's the average membership of students in your building enrolled. So average daily attendance does play a big part in that as well. So making sure students are coming to school as much as possible is important. Also, it doesn't include your preschool students that you are serving. It doesn't include outplaced students and certain other ones that are in the pipeline for CSA funding, social services. So even though we are responsible for the educational records and the education of those students and still maintain all their records in the state reporting with those students, we don't receive funding for them. Another inequity too. So position changes this year. We did not fill a central office position in the pupil services secretary who retired at mid-year. We did not fill this year a full-time high school teacher, a full-time AD, or a full-time high school nurse. So what we did with those positions, because the jobs still have to be done, we did a lot of consolidation and combining, understanding that our enrollment in ADM continued to decline. We have to get more creative with our staffing and ask people to do more, basically. So nurse AD combined, I don't think you'll see that anywhere else. We have a high school teacher that's also our assistant principal. We were able to receive 2 full-time positions, 100% grant funded. One for our financial ed coordinator position for our Families First initiative and the My Future program with children's savings accounts. Very excited about that. And also the Virginia College Advising Corps advisor, 100% grant funded full-time college advising, which has been amazing. Amazingly effective. So we love both of those programs. We'll continue to write grants. I'm writing 2 of them right now. Hopefully to get some additional staffing money that we can apply. Our CHS aid, we moved some aides around to pick up some of those pieces that we needed to. So we absorbed all of that. And that's in anticipation for what we know we're going to have to do in the next year's budget. So we use staffing tools, and there's a worksheet that we use to generate these to see the instruction and SOQ funding and how that relates to how our current staffing looks. Now, remember, preschool we do include because we are responsible, so that automatically will put us over the SOQ funded positions. So our total difference this year at the elementary school with our numbers at 780 would put us at about 3 teachers, 3.5 over with aides, instructional staff.
But that's only SOQ, is it?
Well, instructional staff, correct. So on the worksheet, I also uploaded a worksheet too that you can see other staffing as well, how that plays in. At the high school, with our special ed and general education classes, we're pretty much right on. Not much of a difference there. Where we see we're a little bit over is in career and tech and exploratory, which is where you kind of have to because you need very specialized endorsement areas to cover those classes that the profile of a graduate requires that you teach to provide the career and tech credentials that students now have to have as a graduation requirement. So that's something, if you're up, that's where you do want to see the staffing up a little bit. So the total analysis for planning factors, we know after analyzing all the other staffing too in elementary school, we're up about 1.8 positions. That's much closer than we were before. I think when I ran this initially on a budget several years ago, we were about 8 up over required. So we've done a lot to combine and whittle down that to be more in compliance with our funding streams. Same at the high school, we're up about 2.5. But again, in areas where we can't avoid that because you do need the specialized endorsements and no one's going to work for part-time to provide that much instruction for students who need those credits. Central office staffing, we're at 10.75 FTE as compared to 11.25. So cut down a little bit there. We also have some grants covering some of our people as well at the central office. Even our assistant superintendent, she's covered a lot out of special education flow through grant money. They didn't put that on here, but that's important. Some other positions here too. So as much as we can utilize grant funding for personnel, we will because that is our biggest cost. So scenarios, SOQ raises, you already gave us that scenario. So 3% plus a step is what we're going to build the budget on. That equates to about $296,000 in cost to do that for everybody. But we think it is essential, and we think right now is a very timely approach to doing that, since if what I'm seeing is a lot of other districts are building it on the governor's budget. So if that changes, they'll have some work to do to find it. If it doesn't, we'll be in good standing and have met either the House or Senate version, which is great. And in the meantime, if it doesn't, we still make a lot of headway to gain ground to try to be more competitive with our surrounding districts.
Yeah, so whatever that requirement is, we say we got to achieve it in 2 years. So we want to try to take a step in the right direction anyway. Otherwise, next year we'll be out. Yeah, it'll be out of balance.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, even the fiscal people wouldn't understand the same thing.
Right. So at insurance, we were building the budget on an 8% increase, and that would be a cost of $51,846. But fresh off the press just yesterday, we have found out that our health insurance rates have increased 0%. So 4 years in a row, thank you, Commit to Be Fit, it is working. Our claims are way down, our staff is healthy.
Boy, that's crazy.
Isn't that crazy?
That's amazing, really, when you're...
I was talking to Paul Fuhrer, and they
Do your friends.
theirs on my
Do your friends.
14% health care increase?
They are. So surrounding districts are scrambling to find that. You remember something that happened in Madison last year, 33% increase. Where would we find that?
Yeah.
Yes, 33% in self-insured model. Whew, so, I mean, all of that, that does play a role.
33%, nobody would come.
But, and that's why we're getting a lot of attention. We just had a meeting with an health insurance consultant who was just wondering, we looked at your increases, how are you doing this? And they came to us to try to find how they can help with their surrounding districts to say, and we said, well, it's got to be a focus on staff wellness. Because it is such a big part of it. You keep those claims down, so hey, guess what? Your health insurance rates stay down. We estimate that's about a savings of $1 million over the past 4 years in health care
At least.
for this budget.
This is on the board of supervisors table, right?
Well,
We're going to give them this information.
this is all going to be in the budget report, yes.
Say that.
So yes.
Well, they'll read it, right?
Sure.
They'll read it tomorrow, right?
Okay.
But seriously, I would imagine if I was a surrounding county and I saw that, I would want to ask,
Yes.
can you show us how to implement something
That's right. So our next.
We'll show you for a fee.
for a fee?
I was just going to say, our next phase, we've been talking about that. In our next commit to be fit grant iteration, that's what we want to do is add a services tab to that, and we'll do consult and wellness policy upgrades and do staff development.
As a revenue.
Right, at a cost.
Right.
So we can start generating stuff.
And we charge a lot per hour.
Yes.
So yeah, really amazing. We did not expect that at all.
That it stays.
Yes. Well, we'll continue. Commit to be Fit is working, so we're going to continue that initiative. I put a chart in here just from the SOQ position examples on, and this is a great way to show you how underfunded we really are with that formula after it funnels through LCI. So you're never fully funded, even though they say they fully fund you. There's only a certain number of teachers you get. So how would you have 1.2 teachers for, first grade or 2.09? You can't do that. You need the third classroom to justify. So and to keep
Or
your
you're
class
overstaffed.
size.
I mean, or you're understaffed.
Right. So keeping this in mind, that's why what I'm showing you as overage is over the SOQ criteria. So. Teacher salary benchmarks. These are the latest. We're still at the lowest for starting teacher pay on both the bachelor's and the master's scale. So we do have more work to do there. We catch up a little bit as the years progress, which I think was done intentionally by predecessors too, because that was the bulk of the staff here, and also as a way to honor our veteran teachers who are doing such a great job. But we do know that for our next iteration, we're going to need to do some compression work on our 0 to 5 scale, and that's where we're really going to have to try to get those.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, never mind, I read it wrong.
And the master scale, same thing. The surrounding districts have gained a lot of ground, and the reason is because they get a much higher percentage to do their compensation supplements from the state. So when there is a mandated increase, they get a lot more funding to be able to do it. They can add a local increase to do it. All of ours is localized.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can't even, just to make the ends meet on the mandates, we have to ask for local money. So it's really difficult for us to gain ground when other districts don't have to do that.
Yeah, I think 0.6 or something. 0.61.
Yeah.
Bulk here.
For what?
The LCI.
They're LCI, yes. Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Wasn't Loudon 0.35 or something
Yeah,
like that? I think so.
Loudon is 0.35?
I believe so. Don't quote me on that. I'd have to look it up. It's very low. Loudon County.
Oh, not Loudon, so.
I think they're at a very low LCI, but we'll check that. But anyway, they get a lot
I think
of.
Madison's really. Bulk here is right there.
Yeah, you're right. So our salary rankings, again, we are very, out of 136 districts, this is where we rank last year on our scales. So I'd like to see that improve.
Out of how many districts?
136. All right, so key considerations, second preschool, I did want to talk a little bit about that. That is a non-SOQ funded position. Anytime I get the state in front of me talking about giving us money for preschool, they still won't count them in ADM, which is a big push for us. We want them to count these children because they're using the same facilities, same staffing, same exploratory, same buses. you need to let us count that in our state revenue formulas, but I think it will cost the state lots of money to be able to do that. So we want to push for that. We do believe this would be the best model with the new VPI money we're going to see. However, if we do it, I'm going to recommend that we absorb that as well by moving staff and not trying to hire for additional staffing to do it. As you saw in our staffing tool, it looks like we have the capacity to be able to do it. And after speaking with the principals, we think we have a way to do that. The Virginia Kindergarten Readiness Program, BKRP, is an expansion of the PALS original literacy rating of kindergartners. It's given in preschool, kindergarten, and everywhere all the way up through 3rd grade. So this revealed that in Rappahannock we do have a great need to do more with preschool. So 48% kindergartners arriving not ready, 57% from disadvantaged backgrounds arriving not ready, and then 100% of kindergartners with disabilities are not ready by the time they get kindergarten. So with those statistics, we know we have to have a little bit more control over what we're teaching and the support systems that we have. And we have more capacity at the schools to help with some of those challenging behaviors that we've seen in other placements as well. So I think that's why our colleagues over at CCLC are also recommending that we expand too to be able to handle that capacity. Ag Academy and Coordinator. We are building this into the budget as well. Again, not adding staff, utilizing our current staffing and licensure. Through additional endorsements, I think we'll be able to do this. Full-time benefits, expanding it to 12 months because of a lot of work that the ag coordinator would have to do over the summer. This would resurrect our FFA, which we're very excited about. We haven't seen that chapter, I think, since the early 90s. It was the last time there was one here, which is crazy in Rappahannock County. How do we not have an ag academy, right?
I can make a statement.
So Rappahannock.
There are only 3 farms in the county.
Well, and it's not just farming.
One of them.
The idea behind the academy model is not just about preparing for careers in that. What we're struggling with is graduating students life ready for any careers that they want to go through, but we have a lack of resources for training them for any job that they want to do. So in an industry-rich district, they're sending kids all over the place into computer science or manufacturing and all of these things. We don't have that at our fingertips, but what we do have is an agriculture-rich community that we have the landscape, we have the context, we do have farms, we have vet science, we have environmental science, it's all those pieces, it's not just the farm. Environmental science is a big part of it, so agriculture is a much bigger, broader umbrella for that. So there's a lot of pieces for that. So it's much further beyond just farming. It's the trades, it's welding, it's environmental science. We even have a course in the Ag Academy we're developing called Spanish for the Green Industry. So they can get their language while also learning in the context of a job, career-ready field. So
whenever we have people visit our farm, we say, we need a welder. Our welder is getting
there
old.
you
The guy who fixes our tractor is getting old. Really,
it's so important.
We need all the support and all of those skills need to stay in the county, or we won't have any.
Absolutely. And we have lots of potential partnerships out there already we're exploring. So the idea, remember, I've introduced this before, is that when a kid graduates now through an academy, they'll not only have a diploma, but they'll have a handful of stackable credentials, certifications, dual enrollment credit, and hands-on work experience, and then a post-secondary promise, whether that be an internship over the summer or guaranteed entrance into a program, an interview, a community college course that will be paid for, a scholarship, whatever that is. So through the partnerships we're forming, we think we have what's available to be able to launch this next fall.
You have somebody lined up for this?
We do. Through current staffing, we think we'll be able to absorb this at no additional cost. We had hoped originally to combine this because the county also funds the 4-H coordinator position, and to my knowledge, they have not found a suitable person for that, and it's less hours. So what I had proposed was that we could expand that, combine forces, get the 12-month benefited position, save the county quite a bit of money because it is a county-funded position, but there's a lot of resistance to doing that from the local 4-H center, the extension office. So But the offer still stands. We would love to do that. It would save the county a lot of money and also integrate the 4-H curriculum within the schools and embed it a little more. So, the 4-H extension office. So, so we'll keep.
So would it help to talk to them?
I think so. I mean, the door's still open, so if they haven't found anyone, they're going to need somebody to do this, and we don't want to lose it. 4-H programs are so important, and we love that program. And our family financial education teacher that's grant funded was the former 4-H coordinator, who's also very willing to help. So I think we have a perfect blend there. So I still leave that door open, and maybe the county, through that discussion, we can reconsider. Another academy, I didn't have a slide for this because it didn't happen until just this morning. So Health Science Academy will be a go as well through our partnership with RAPC. 2 different tracks, one for more workforce oriented directly into the workforce and one for the advanced track for the health sciences. And it looks like we'll have both of those ready for fall launch.
Wow.
No additional cost, current staffing.
It's amazing.
Yes.
We got to learn how to market that.
Well, we already.
It needs to be a brochure.
And you will see the full presentation of those next month, where they will bring you the brochure and all of the tracks that go along with it. So you'll hear a whole presentation.
And there's 45 kids involved in this?
Yes. So, I mean, it's going to be a big deal. We're even soft testing some of the classes. Friday with RAPC, we're starting phlebotomy for high school students. So that's really unheard of. So we love that partnership too. And through that, they're helping raise some grant funds and scholarships for kids too, to be able to do it. So yes, we're very excited. Community budget survey. This was the breakdown of who answered, who were our respondents, mostly parents. Parents responded to the highest extent, which gives us a really good idea of what, our consumer, basically our parents want. Community survey priorities. This was the top 10 from parents mostly. Teacher staff salaries. So that says a lot to your read of the pulse of your constituencies, because that's exactly what they said too. School staff salaries, teacher salaries, pay our teachers, we love our teachers. School safety, number 2. Curriculum enrichment, number 3, which has been a shift, which I like to see that. So school nutrition, there's been a lot of attention lately to the school nutrition side of things. We are still climbing. We're right now 46% free and reduced lunch at the elementary school.
46%?
46, that's higher than I think we've ever been.
That's
almost half
That's
of our
only the
students.
ones that have applied.
Applied. So Mandy Grove Butler is working really hard to market that, to say, even if you pack lunch every day, fill out the application, you might be eligible, because if we can get over that 50% mark, there's a lot more funding for school nutrition that will come to us. So if we can get that mark over the 50%, which we know they're there, that will open up quite a lot more funding streams for us. And maybe the potential for school-wide lunch at the elementary eventually, because we are a Title I school there. So we'll see. We'll continue to press that. STEM education, staff benefits, career and tech ed, small class sizes, school capital, and instructional support. So all really great things to consider in the budget. Any final thoughts as we, one I have is that we know our ADM is much lower than before, so our goal is to do everything that we've said we were going to do and not ask the county for anything.
So it looks like the cost impacts to our bottom line are going to be the $300K, and so the $30K that we talked about for the preschool program.
Yes.
Would that come through the school budget?
It depends. Last year, CCLC had asked for the direct aid to serve those kids.
Right.
The county decided it might be better to funnel it through fiscal agency as a school. Yep. That worked perfectly, so they're fine either way.
Right. But that means our add-on is $330, basically, at this point.
Well, and I'd ask that the county keep that as a set-aside, not in the school bottom line.
Not in the school bottom line.
No, sir. It's important when we go for the additional mixed delivery grant funds and things to show county support, and if it's on their books, it really shows their commitment to investing, and that gives us more a higher score on the rubric for those grant funds, so that will help as well. So yeah, we'll ask that not be added to our budget, and that be a set aside. And the set aside will only be accessed after we've utilized every other funding stream.
Yep.
So we won't even tap into it unless we need to. So. So that's the impact. We're going to try to absorb every single bit of it, knowing that our numbers are lower and we'll have to, we have some more work to do. So our intention is that we'll come in at level funding.
And with the health insurance not going.
That helped. Yes, thank goodness.
It's amazing. I don't have a copy of our calendar on me. So when's our next, do we have another work session planned anytime soon, or do we need one?
I have it here. Hold on.
Do we need it? I'm not sure. I'm not sure how far out we'll need it.
Where is it?
I mean,
Because he put all of us on here.
as the numbers start coming from Richmond, we could refine some things, but
We could.
I'm not sure what we have to meet about right now.
Well, the most that we're doing is we're using current staff to get more creative.
Right.
The raises are the really only additional costs that we'll
Right.
have to absorb, and then the pay-go account is still viable, and that's through the county with the capital improvements that we're making on our 5-year plan. So as long as that stays intact, we're in good shape.
Right, and so my point is that we don't need to have a work session to sit
I've
there.
got one scheduled for the 17th of March.
Yeah.
Oh, 17th of March, okay.
Yep.
That's probably reasonable. That's right before we go final.
Yeah, that's
That's
probably a
good.
good time.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I'm going to be.
All right.
St. Patrick's Day. St. Patrick's Day.
No, my daughter's having her
And
50th
it's
birthday.
I better go there.
End of February, we
If
should
I
know
want to
more,
live, I
but
do.
last year they were delayed much further. So.
All right, any questions?
No, I think it's great.
Yeah, well done. All right, the next thing on the agenda is the BSBA honor roll, business honor roll. And if we had any suggestions for such a thing, right? Because we're just developing that idea.
Right, and we bring that back at next month's meeting, correct? Next month's
Yeah.
meeting to vote on.
So, does anybody got any ideas? Because I have one. No. I did have one, yeah. But I want to hear somebody else's ideas. No? So my only idea was this. This particular year is marked by, significantly by, I believe, and I see, I've forgotten the name of it already. My future.
Family future.
My future.
Yeah.
My future accounts.
Yeah.
And family future.
Yeah.
And they're being managed through a local financial institution, which I think might be really good to recognize
That's
that
a great idea.
institution.
That's a good idea.
Oakview.
Yeah.
So-
Oakview Bank.
Oakview.
I mean, it's a big deal.
It's a huge
And
deal.
they're playing a significant role in it, and it's, you know,
No, it's good.
That's a good idea.
It's a good idea.
so can we draft that?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Any other ideas?
It's a surprise, by the way.
It's a
That's a
surprise, so,
surprise.
yeah. Pay no attention.
I don't.
All right. It's not a surprise.
No, we have to invite them, so they'll listen.
Good, so we're done with that?
Mm-hmm.
Good, all right, let's move on. Madison Agreement. So this is an annual thing that we have to redo, and it's basically the same and a great value to our county because we share their LCI when we do these things.
Yes.
And it costs us very little as far as, you know, shaking hands and whatever, but we have to do it officially. Any questions or comments about it?
Let's do it.
We're going to vote on that later before we go, right?
Yes.
Report of the Headwaters representative.
Yes, I have a report. So Headwaters welcomed their new executive director, Lenny Janot, who started work yesterday, I believe. And I'm personally thrilled to have an executive director and one that is so well known and liked in the school. So welcome to Lenny. The summer chorus has scheduled their camp. This will be their 4th year doing it. It'll begin on Monday, June 22nd, and then end with a concert on Thursday, July 2nd at Castleton. And there will be, there are scholarships available, $5,000 for scholarships and supplies. There's also a new Headwaters-sponsored Adventure Day camp called Dream Big, which is going to be June 15th and 19th. It's for kindergarten to 6th graders are campers. 7th graders can be counselors in training, and high school, age of 12, can be teen counselors. It's at Graves Mountain Lodge, and scholarships are also available to campers whose families need financial assistance for this. It's run by Jenny CAFSA, and it's based on the profile of a graduate priorities. So it'll be good career and sort of fun with career exploration and life skills oriented activities.
To be fair, that's actually your program through your superintendent in your school.
And
we are happy
we're
to help.
doing, yeah, but I'm sponsoring it. Gary's not running it. Of course not.
Come on, Jerry.
We couldn't do it without you, Gary.
Come on, Gary.
Clarify. But those are great partnerships that that's all that I have. So.
All right, thank you, MVGS.
We actually did have a meeting.
Oh, wow.
We actually, at the meetings, just for people to know, that there's always a couple students that come from Mountain Vista and do a demonstration. And it was 2 senior girls that did a robot demonstration that they're entering into the National Robotics Competition. And it was just amazing. And their whole process was amazing. We approved a calendar for 1920, right?
That's this year.
2021. Change the date on that. And we also reviewed the 1920 budget and also approved the 2021 budget with our 8 slots at no increase.
That's good.
And approved a new computer use policy. It's been found that we called it BYOD, bring your own device. It comes to find out that in some of the higher ends, the
MacBook Pro.
MacBook, or whatever they call it, doesn't carry enough memory. So kids that are in the higher ends can bring their own computers and got them up there. They have some rules with it. But we agree. That's it.
Thanks. Is there anybody that would like to address the board this evening? Public comment? Anybody? Yes.
Just real quickly, while it's great that the 0 increase in the health insurance is a wonderful piece of news for the budget, remember what that really means. It means you have incredibly healthy staff. So in terms of what it means when a teacher's out of school, they have to get a sub. When a teacher isn't at her best or his best because they're languishing under whatever their health issue is, I just think that in addition to the great news that it's a 0% dollar increase, let's not forget the real benefit of that program is that our kids are benefiting from healthier staff, and that those people themselves, who might be a little older than our kids, are also going to have much better lives because the program has been implemented to help them be healthy. Plus, think of the modeling for the students that they have. So I just think that all the good stuff that's happening, everything tonight I've heard about is good stuff. Yes, let's celebrate $0 on the budget increase, but let's always remember that what that represents is really better lives. So,
we spoke, I think, last year about this idea, and really it was a culture, and I think that's what you presented at VSBA too. It was the idea of creating a new culture, changing the culture to be thinking about things this way, and it is huge. Yeah. Anybody else? All right, moving ahead, is there a motion to adopt the school calendar for 2021?
So moved.
Motion, Mr. Ubens, is there a second? Second, Mr. Grove. Any discussion? All in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed, no. So ordered. Is there a motion to approve the Madison agreement as was presented this evening?
So moved.
We have a motion, Mr. Ubens, is there a second?
Second.
Second, Ms. Bynum. Any discussion? All in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed, no. So ordered. Is there any new business? What's the date of our March meeting? Is it the 10th? What's the Tuesday? I don't have a calendar from you. Oh, yeah. 10? March the 10th? 6:30. I guess we're back in the band room. Are we, or are we in here? Probably in the band room. Are we here? Oh, that's our public hearing for the budget. So that's from there. In here. All right, so 6:30, March the 10th, the same location as tonight. All right, we have a motion to move into closed session, Mr. Grove.
I do. I move that the board convene into closed session for the following purpose: to discuss the consider the appointment of staff members for classified and coaching positions and resignation of a classified position pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.23711A1.
We have a motion, Mr. Grove, is there a second?
Second.
Second from Ms. Bynum. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, no. So we'll take a short recess. We're going to be in closed session for how long?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. And then we'll come back and basically vote on the personnel report if needed and adjourn.